In his past life, he saved a girl in exchange for his own life. He pushed the young lady aside when a large truck was heading straight for them. He thought that if he were to be reborn, he would want to live the life of a popular man with a harem. It was a clear day outside. There were two people in a clearing surrounded by a dense forest. The man swung his sword and the boy jumped away from him. The young boy frowned when the man asked him if they were done and if that was all he could do. The man said it was his turn now and swung his sword. He started to attack the guy, but the guy bared his teeth and dodged the attack and swung his sword, attacking himself. The man was shocked that the guy had now anticipated his attack. They stopped. The man said that he did not expect this from the young man. He hugged the guy sharply and with a happy face and with tears in his eyes said that it was a great job and that this was his son. The main character, Rain, was a little embarrassed and smiled. He thanked his father for what he had said, but said that he was not ready yet. The father looked at the young man with surprise. He continued that it was because his father's punch was incredible. The protagonist, Rain, imagined his father splitting the earth and mountains with his punch, thus explaining what he had said earlier. His father looked into the distance, shielding his eyes from the sun. The protagonist, named Rain, thought that his father lacked common sense. This was the reason for his unusual past. He thought about his father's past. There was a dragon that turned into a demon called the Great Calamity. Even the power of 3 countries could not defeat it. But the protagonist, Rain's father, and his 7 friends defeated it alone. The book said he was given this land as a reward. He never talked about it, though. There must be a reason for that, though they both have their secrets. Since the main character named Rain was reincarnated, he never tells him about it. If he told his father about it, it would end up being a disaster. The main character, Rain, made a sad face and thought that he was glad to be alive. Although he remembers almost nothing about his past life, although he has some memories of his past life, but he remembers absolutely nothing about his relationships or his daily life. But he remembers his last moments. He remembers the episode when he reached out to the young girl who was clearly surprised and frightened by this terrible situation. The main character named Rain was very confused, because right in front of his face, out of nowhere, someone's lush form appeared. The girl called out to him and carefully asked if he was okay. The main character named Rain was asked by a maid named May in surprise what she was doing there. She was looking at him with a smile. The girl hugged the main character, Rain, and said that there was a landslide on the road and she thought something might have happened to him and that she was assigned to take care of him. She said he seemed to take care of himself. Father said she shouldn't be so good-natured, and that was the reason she was so poor. Father was suddenly overcome with sadness. A maid named May politely asked him to put himself in her place. She made a pitiful expression and said that when she found herself as a child, she did not know what to do. Her father called out loudly to her. The maid, whose name was May, turned to him and just wanted to say something. But the main character named Rain interrupted her, and with an unperturbed face and a smile, said that he was glad that his father was so good-natured, then thanked them for their concern. The father and the maid named May hugged the main character Rain with tears of joy. The girl said that the main character named Rain was so wonderful, and the father of the young man said that he was proud of his son. The main character named Rain was not very pleased with such a tight hug. After they let him go, the maid, whose name was May, said that something was waiting for him now. His father asked what it was. The maid, whose name was May, grabbed him and dragged him away, saying that he had important business to attend to and asked him to return immediately. The father, with tears and a dissatisfied face, reached out to his son. The main character, named Rain, called out to a maid named May and asked if she had any work for him. The maid named May turned to him and said that she did, and asked him to help him with his lunch. She smiled and told him to choose his favorite mountain vegetables. The main character, Rain, thought that the family was short of money. After some time, the sky was covered with clouds. The main character named Rain was sitting in a clearing and rummaging through his bag. He said that he would collect them when he returned home, and began to talk about what he had planned for today. Taking out the book, he opened it and frowned, thinking that today he had magic, but he was not very good at it. He laughed nervously, thinking that he could not understand what was written in the book at all, and that he understood the principles, but not the logic. He read that when you speak words, You summon a spirit from which you borrow the power of its element. This is what magic is said about, but when the main character, Rain, tried, nothing happened. He remembered trying to set a small log on fire. The main character, Rain, tried to start a fire on his own. He thought that after all, you can't start a fire out of nothing. Behind him, some sounds suddenly came from the bushes. The main character, named Rain, became a little scared and wary. The main character, named Rain, looked at the source of the sound, and to his surprise, it was a boar. The main character, named Rain, thought it was just a wild boar, but then he noticed a small horn on its forehead and thought it was a magic stone. The boar approached the main character, Rain, and it turned out to be a demonic boar. In this world, these strange stones parasitize animals and turn them into ferocious demons, and the main character named Rain has heard many stories of cattle turning into demons and destroying entire cities. The boar stood right in front of Rain. The main character, Rain, thought that he had hunted wild boars before, but today he only had a wooden sword, a thick book, and a bento with him. He looked at all this and thought that these were his last minutes of life. The boar dug his hooves into the ground, loosening it beneath him, and prepared to attack. The main character, named Rain, took his sword and frowned, thinking that he was the son of a hero and he could not run away. The boar rushed towards the main character, Rain, and the young man bared his teeth. The boar hit the ground with its muzzle, and the main character, Rain, was thrown a little to the side, as he thought it was impossible. The boar started eating his bento, and the protagonist, named Rain, looked at him with a sad expression. The protagonist, named Rain, thought that he was in big trouble, and if only he could use magic at times like this. The main character, named Rain, opened the book and thought, all or nothing. He began to read about the lightning of God's wrath, shining in the storm clouds, the tip of his wrath, the mighty enemy before them, the blue blade cutting through the darkness, but after that he did not know how to read, and the boar was getting closer to him. But suddenly, a loud roar was heard behind the main character, Rain, and he turned around with a frightened face, on which one could see a slight misunderstanding, thinking about what was happening, and whether, trying to cast a spell, he really learned magic. The main character, Rain, looked up in surprise at the bright sunny light. He said that, as expected, it didn't look like his magic, although it didn't look like magic either. He extended his hand and said that it was very difficult to end the life of a demonic boar at once, and what kind of light this was. The main character, named Rain, touched something that went beyond this light, and quickly pulled his hands away from the unknown, loudly and fearfully asking what kind of slime it was. He watched in surprise as a young girl came out to him without clothes and hugged him tenderly, shocking him by telling him that she had finally found him. There was a strange sound. The main character, named Rain, fell to the ground, and this girl was touching him. The main character, named Rain, blushed deeply and began to shout at her indignantly, asking who she was, and said that his name was the main character named Rain Curtis, the son of Lord Religus. The girl looked at him a little dissatisfied and indignantly. The main character named Rain thought that maybe she didn't understand him, but then the girl said that her name was Marina. She blushed and said seriously that he gave his life for her. The main character named Rain was shocked. He thought that this was the same young girl from his last memory, from his past life. The girl turned her back on him and said that she wanted to repay him in full. The protagonist, Rain, suddenly started bleeding from the nose. She sat between his legs and pressed herself against him and gently placed his hand on hers, not covered by any clothes. The main character named Rain said in shock and with a slight blush on his cheeks that it was dangerous, but it was very nice. She blushed deeply and began to sigh. After a while, she was already on all fours and loudly saying that she wanted to be his. The main character, named Rain, looked at her with a smirk and thought that this was not something that a teenager could hold back. There were loud noises in the clearing. After some time, the main character named Rain came home and said that he was back. He was met by their maid named May and greeted him. The maid, May, said a little nervously that she was sure she had asked him to pick mountain vegetables, and then asked the protagonist if it looked like mountain vegetables. She pointed her finger at Marina, who was standing next to Rain, hugging his arm. The maid named May repeated a little nervously that these were mountain vegetables with a very large, lush shape. The main character named Rain shouted at her with displeasure and indignation that this was not so. The father put his hand on Marina's shoulder and frowned, saying that he realized that the main character named Rain had gotten what he had asked for, his side dish for tonight, or rather, the material for his ideas. The girl Marina shyly covered her body with her hand. A maid named May punched the protagonist Rain's father with incredible force, and the young man fell to the floor with desperate tears in his eyes. Thus, the curtain rose on his popular harem life. The girl Marina stood in a very cute pose and growled in a gentle voice. Sometime later, in the morning, birds were chirping outside the window, sitting on a tree growing near the window. The main character, Rain, was still lying in bed. He quietly moaned under the blanket, then said that it was already morning. He opened his eyes and thought that it was usually cold, but for some reason today it was unusually warm. When he thought that he was even pleased, he saw that a girl named Marina was looking at him from under the blanket with a rather sweet look. She wished him good morning and leaned towards him to kiss him. The main character, Rain, blushed slightly and asked in shock what she was doing. The girl Marina said that he seemed to be enjoying himself and stood up straight, so she decided to help him. The girl Marina continued to touch her body, suggesting that he continue. The main character, named Rain, indignantly said that he could not stand it and asked her to stop. A maid named May suddenly appeared behind Marina, and the maid slowly and quietly reached out to her with her hands. She said that she understood him, and that she would make sure that this cat would no longer breathe. The maid, named May, picked her up in her arms. The maid, named May, dragged her away from the main character, Rain. The girl Marina reached out to the young man and said that their relationship was revealed, after which she added that she would end her life, and then asked him for help. The main character named Rain was stunned by what the young girl said. He looked pitifully at the maid named May, and asked hopefully if she was serious. The maid named May stopped and let Marina go, and said seriously that she shouldn't be so careless, and now she needs to get dressed. The girl Marina said that she didn't have any clothes. The maid, named May, sighed tiredly and with slight displeasure, and then went to the curtains and asked if she could borrow a pair of his curtains. To which the protagonist, named Rain, replied that she could, and asked in surprise what she would do with them. The maid, whose name was May, began to carefully wrap Marina with the curtains that had just been taken down. She said that this was a special skill of a maid. She wrapped the hips, shoulders, and curves of the young girl, made a couple of knots, and said that everything was ready. Now the girl Marina was in a beautiful light dress made of curtains. She said it was great. The main character, named Rain, said that another bow should be added. Hearing this, the maid, named May, said that it would be done and pinned a nice bow on her hair. The main character, named Rain, said that she was very cute, which made the girl Marina blush and look at him with a slight smile. The girl Marina thanked him and lowered her dress, saying that she would thank him with her body. The maid named May looked at her angrily, saying that she had had enough. The father looked into the room and asked if he could come in now. The maid, whose name was May, said with guilt in her eyes that she had already forgotten about him, then allowed him in and apologized for keeping him waiting. The father pulled out a chair and sat down, saying that he wanted to ask him something. He clasped his fingers near his face, resting them on his chin and leaning his elbows on the table, and asked Marina who she was. He looked at them menacingly, and the maid, whose name was May, stood next to him, holding her hands behind her back. The main character named Rain and the maid named May stood in front of their father like little children who had just done something wrong. The girl Marina said that only the main character named Rain had shown kindness to her, who had been lonely for a long time. The main character named Rain looked at Marina with interest when she said that she always wanted to thank him for helping her once. She gently placed her palm on his chest and said that this was why she had come here after his life had ended. Father, unexpectedly for everyone, suddenly jumped up from his seat, saying that this could not be, and that this was the magic of reincarnation. The father frowned and looked menacingly at the protagonist Rain, asking if he had an incredible talent for magic, and wasn't it amazing? The protagonist named Rain, facing his menacing father, was a little taken aback, wondering how it came to this. The main character, Rain, trembled, trying to say something. The father mumbled and said that everything was clear, and he did not know. The father raised his finger and said that the magic of reincarnation could change his life. The main character, Rain, sighed and said that it was cool. The maid, whose name was May, asked him what he was going to do with her. Father hugged Marina lovingly. With tears in his eyes and sadness on his face, he said that they would not be able to feed more people. Her father let her go and asked her seriously if she had a place where she could stay. The girl, Marina, said with a light and mysterious smile that there is. She hugged the hand of the main character, Rain, and said that it is where the main character named Rain is. The girl, Marina, pressed herself against the main character, Rain, hugging his hand. The girl, Marina, slowly reached out to the lips of the young man to kiss the main character, Rain, and said that she loved him. The father laughed a little nervously, repeating that this is where the main character named Rain is, and the maid named May said that it was useless. A maid named May called out to Marina. She turned to her, and the maid named May said that she would hire her as a maid, and the main character named Rain would be her employer. The girl Marina looked at the main character Rain and asked if he could handle it. The girl Marina smirked with confidence in her eyes and giggled, confidently saying that she would try to serve the main character Rain, after which the young girl thought that she would receive the key to his room. The father looked at them without much interest and said that now they would go to the mountains to see what his magic was capable of. After some time, they came to a clearing. Birds were flying in the sky. The father said that it was time to begin and asked what kind of magic the girl Marina could use. The girl Marina, looking into the eyes of the father of the main character Rain, said that she cannot use magic. The father looked at the young girl in shock, asking her if she had just used reincarnation magic. The main character, named Rain, made a pitiful face and said that he couldn't either. The girl Marina lightly patted him on the head, thereby calming him down. The father, looking at them, said that nothing could be done about it, and today they would have a special lesson in magic. Father said that magic, simply put, is the power of imagination, but it is not easy to imagine something powerful, and to compensate for this, they compose poems corresponding to the elements. This is the essence of pronouncing magic. He went on to explain that there were 7 elements in total, and that learning would be faster if one practiced with the element that was easier to visualize. The girl Marina and the main character named Rain looked at him in confusion, asking again about the performance and the elements. The father stood in a small stupor and with slight displeasure said that perhaps it would be better if he showed them. Father said that you need to mix the magic power with both hands. He brought his palms closer to each other and a flame appeared between them. He said that you need to imagine the shape of the magic power while pronouncing and use it. He launched the flame towards the forest. There was a huge explosion, comparable to a nuclear one, and the hill was almost completely destroyed. Father was quite surprised and said that it was happening somehow, although he did not even try. He said with a little whine that he couldn't believe that even so the power was so huge. The girl Marina patted him on the head, telling him to keep his nose up. The main character, named Rain, looked at them and thought about what would happen if he invested. The whole world would end. After some time, the father said that now it was their turn, and first they would practice mixing the magical power, and if they trained for half a year, it would take shape. The girl Marina brought her palms closer to each other, and after some time, a crystal appeared there. With an unperturbed face, she said that everything was ready, and she froze the water in the air. The father was surprised and said it was amazing. The main character, Reina, was not doing well, and he said she was more talented than he expected. Afterwards, he stopped and said that something was wrong with the girl Marina, and there were snowdrifts around her. The father looked at her a little scared. He shouted at Marina that the magic power was out of control and she needed to calm down. He said that she needed to calm her mind. His feet began to freeze. Afterwards, the father's entire body was covered in ice up to his neck. The main character, named Rain, called out to him worriedly, and the father said that he was the only one who could help him now. The main character, named Rain, looked at his father worriedly. His father looked at him seriously and told him to use magic with another element so that they would neutralize each other. He said confidently that he knew he could do it and that he was counting on him. The amount of ice only increased. The main character, named Rain, looked at the ice and thought that If he did not do something, his father would end his life. He looked at Marina and tried to think how the girl Marina used ice magic. He frowned, and the young man thought that if she was able to freeze the water in the air, then she should use a counteracting element to the water. Suddenly, someone called out to him from nowhere. The girl Marina told him to run away from there, but the main character named Rain covered his stomach with his hands and said that he was not running away at this rate. The main character named Rain turned his back to her and said that he saved her life in her past life, and he would protect her as many times as he could. A multitude of ice crystals rushed towards him. The protagonist named Rain frowned and brought his palms closer, commanding to pierce. He put his hand forward and an electric grid spread around. Static electricity. Lightning. He tried to catch his breath while small lightning bolts were still running down his arm. After which the main character named Rain froze in surprise, saying that he could. The father came up to them and hugged the main character Rain and his girlfriend Marina. He said loudly that the main character named Rain was a good boy. The main character named Rain said that he was glad that he was okay. The father let them go and said that he didn't think he was capable of using magic, let alone unlocking the difficult-to-understand element lightning. The main character named Rain hugged Marina tightly and thanked her, and said that it was thanks to the push she gave him. The girl Marina did not answer, and there was not a single emotion on her face. The young guy called her, but unexpectedly for everyone, she fell to the ground, and the main character named Rain worriedly picked her up and asked if she was okay. The girl Marina said with tears in her eyes that she had an incurable disease that could never be cured. The main character named Rain frowned and asked in surprise what kind of disease it was and how it suddenly appeared. She sat on his lap and slightly removed her top, then said that this disease lies in Rhine, and it is her favorite disease. They both blushed, and the main character named Rhine was a little shocked and embarrassed. The girl Marina said with hope in her eyes that she could only be cured by him. The main character named Rain indignantly and with fear in his eyes shielded her with his hand, which the girl Marina did not expect, and said that he did not think that he could help here with anything. The girl Marina looked at his hand, then took it, and said that she would change the plan, and now she would cure the main character Rain. She began to lick the finger of the main character Rain. The main character named Rain looked at Marina in shock, thinking what the hell this was and that it was dangerous. The girl Marina was already licking 2 fingers and asked if his wounds had gotten better. The main character Rain was already quite awkward. He said that it was very nice. The main character named Rain closed one eye and looked at Marina, thinking that his friend was no longer holding back. The girl Marina continued to lick his fingers, after which she looked away and, calling him Pao Pao Sama, asked if he wanted to be taken care of too. The main character, named Rain, cried out in concern that it was time to stop, because his father was nearby. The girl Marina, with an understanding face, said that if it was him, then everything was fine. She showed him the magic letter, and the main character, named Rain, was quite surprised by this. The letter was written on behalf of the father, that he understood what was going on, that's why he went home first, and that the main character, named Rain, shouldn't worry. He also told the maid named May that they would be gone all night, and that he was looking forward to his grandchildren. The main character named Rain was very shocked. The girl Marina enthusiastically told him to release absolutely all his energy on her. The main character named Rain indignantly said that no magic comes from there. So the main character named Rain learned magic. The girl Marina began to squeeze her lush forms again, saying that she noticed that he began to reach up somewhere, and she thought that he wanted to crawl away, so she strangled him a little. The main character named Rain trembled a little, but did not answer her. The girl Marina approached the main character Rain and asked what he thought. She hugged him and pressed herself as tightly as possible to him. The main character named Rain frowned a little, saying that he was almost done. Afterwards, he said with delight that he had succeeded. A flame appeared between his palms. The girl Marina smiled slightly and said that it was simply amazing, while the father, with tears in his eyes, hugged the young man and said with delight that this was exactly what he expected from his son. After some time, they came to a clearing. The father said that they were both making remarkable progress in magic. The main character, named Rain, thanked him. They looked at Marina, who was skilled in magic, and the main character named Rain said that he was no match for the girl Marina. The father, in order to encourage his son, told the protagonist Rain that when it comes to wielding a sword, he is very experienced, and they will have another duel soon. Suddenly, a maid named May appeared from behind, quickly running towards her father. She called out to the protagonist's father, Rain. He turned to her and asked what was the matter and whether there would be no side dish for dinner again. The maid, whose name was May, snapped at him angrily and said no. The maid named May trembled slightly and said that a terrible epidemic had broken out in the village in their territory, and the first symptoms had appeared. The father was shocked by this news and became slightly wary. The maid, May, closed her eyes and said that according to the report, after suffering from diarrhea and vomiting something like white water, the victim's body freezes and dries up completely. She continued that it was a disease that would end life in a few days. Father asked seriously about the healer Lolina. The maid, named May, said that she asked for her help, but it seemed that she would not arrive soon. The main character, named Rain, began to speculate about what would happen to the villagers. The girl Marina tugged at his clothes slightly. The main character named Rain looked at his companion and asked what happened. The girl Marina whispered something in his ear and he frowned. He said seriously that he understood everything. The main character, named Rain, proudly placed his hand on his chest and called out to his father, saying that he knew what kind of disease it was and that perhaps they could save the residents. The father asked in shock how they were going to do this. The main character, Rain, asked with a serious look if there was a place around here with a lot of salt. A maid named May said indignantly that now was not the time to talk about salt, but her father blocked her way with his hand and told her to stop. Eventually, the father agreed with Rain and said that there were salt deposits to the west of their location and that it would take about 10 days to deliver it by cart. Then the father asked them how they were going to deliver it without a cart. The girl Marina put her hands behind her back. The main character named Rain confidently said that they would not need her and that they would use something else instead. The girl Marina took apples from the barrels and put some on her head and held others in her hands. The main character, named Rain, sat down and showed her dexterity to her father and the maid named May. The father looked at them a little confused and said that it was a great trick, and then asked how they were going to deliver the salt with it. The girl Marina said that it was not a magic trick and then took a bite out of the apple. She began to chew and, with her mouth full, a little indistinctly, said that this was a magical storage and this was an easy way to deliver salt. Father, looking at her, asked her to say something understandable. The main character named Rain explained that this is a magical storage invented by a girl named Marina, and with its help it will be easy to deliver such a quantity of salt. You can put water and large things there and the food will not spoil. And you don't need a cart. The father asked how they would get there, if they would run. The main character named Rain smiled a little uncertainly and said that if he were with his father, it would be faster to run. But since the girl Marina was with him, he would use something. The main character named Rain raised something up. The main character named Rain explained to his father and the maid named May that they would fly on a shield using the wind, while the girl Marina was already floating in the air on the shield as if nothing had happened, eating an apple. The father looked at this and said that he did not think that it was possible to use a shield like that. The main character named Rain put his finger to his lips and said that regarding the money to buy salt, he was thinking of doing a quest from the guild somewhere near the deposits. The maid named May grabbed Marina and told her not to be so careless. The girl Marina whined in pain. The maid, whose name was May, smiled slightly and, without letting go of Marina, said that she would then pick up a task to end someone's life, but it could be dangerous. Abruptly, the father said loudly that everything was decided. He put his hand out to the side and called the main character Rain and Marina, telling them to show him how they deal with such a serious problem. The main character named Rain agreed, and the girl Marina continued to eat the apple and said to leave it to them. The sky was bright and fluffy clouds were floating. The main character named Rain took Marina in his arms and said that they would leave then. The father said that he was counting on them. They stood on a shield on an icy hill going up. The main character named Rain asked if the girl Marina was ready. She agreed. The protagonist named Rain clenched his teeth tensely, and they rushed forward and upward. The protagonist named Rain held Marina tightly in his arms, and she gently hugged his neck, resting her head on his neck. The maid, May, and the father watched them as they walked away from them, The maid, May, said that she hoped that everything would be all right. The father looked into the distance, shielding his face from the sun, and said that it seemed that all they could do was hope. Her long hair and the cape that hung from her father's shoulders fluttered in the wind. He said that it was growing faster than she could imagine. A maid named May approached her father, saying that it would be better for them to go to the village rather than just stand here in the clearing. Her father agreed with the maid and said that they needed to come up with a backup plan just in case. After some time, the main character named Rain and the girl Marina were on some beach. There was a cat lying on a stone, yawning lazily. The main character named Rain said that, judging by the description, the assassination mission was being carried out somewhere here. The girl Marina agreed with him. The main character named Rain scratched his head and said that he meant that it was very peaceful here. The girl Marina picked up the cat, touching him. The main character named Rain turned to Marina and said that he was wondering who they should deal with. The mission stated that beach invaders were building nests on the west coast and causing trouble, and asked to deal with them to protect the salt fields. The protagonist, Rain, did not understand what beach invaders and nests meant. They walked along the shore, which was washed by the waves of the sea, and the cat followed them. The main character named Rain said that if these were just crows, then he could handle it himself, and told Marina to save her magic power for the way back. The girl Marina agreed, and said that she understood him. They looked into some hole, including the kitten, and the main character named Rain said in surprise that there were a lot of holes here, and he asked the young girl if these could be such nests. He noticed that there was something in the depths. Someone's huge tentacles crawled out of the hole, and the main character named Rain and his girlfriend Marina looked at them in fear. They fell to the ground, and the cat, whose fur stood on end, looked aggressively at these tentacles. The main character, Rain, said that these were definitely not crows. He looked at the tentacles with great fear, frowning. A beach squid emerged from the hole. The main character, named Rain, screamed in fear that it was a squid and reached for his sword, which was in his bosom, telling Marina to stand behind him. The girl Marina, with an unperturbed face, agreed. The squid looked at them and, opening his mouth, spat ink at them. The main character, named Rain, thought that he could just dodge, but then he suddenly remembered that there should be a girl Marina behind him, and turned around with a frightened look. The girl Marina made a shelter out of ice and the ink fell into it, and the girl Marina and the cat were safe. The main character, Rain, sighed with relief and said that she was an expert in magic, and it seemed that she did not need his protection. The girl Marina remembered the words of the main character, Rain, that he would protect her as many times as he could. She left the shelter and approached the squid. The main character named Rain looked at her in surprise and called out, not understanding what she was doing. The squid wrapped a tentacle around her wrist. The squid grabbed Marina by her arms and legs, wrapping her body with tentacles. The girl Marina looked at the main character Rain with a calm face, telling the main character named Rain to save her. The main character named Rain indignantly and fearfully asked why she even went there. The girl Marina, still calmly, without any emotion, said that she wanted the main character named Rain to protect her. The main character named Rain was very indignant and looked at her angrily, asking what she meant. There were already 4 beach squids in front of Rain. The girl Marina said that it was because the main character named Rain was strong, and she was a weak girl. The squid pulled the straps of her dress down her shoulders with a tentacle. The squid untied her dress, which surprised the girl Marina very much. Squid took off her dress made from curtains when the girl Marina asked him to stop. The main character, named Rain, saw this, became wary, and was very scared by such an unexpected situation. He wondered why he took off her clothes, and the girl Marina blushed. The main character, named Rain, looked at this with an evil eye, wondering if this meant that the girl Marina was in trouble. The squid held Marina's legs and arms tightly, wrapping its tentacles around her entire body. The main character, named Rain, grinned and thought that he should help her immediately. The girl Marina opened her mouth. The main character, Rain, blushed slightly as he looked at Marina without her clothes. He thought that if he made a wrong move, he could hurt her, so he should take a closer look a little more. The main character, named Rain, watched as the squid wrapped around not only her curves, but also her hips and crawled with its tentacles right towards the girl. The main character named Rain tried to justify his inaction by saying that he was simply assessing the situation. The main character Rain, unexpectedly for himself, started bleeding from his nose, and he was already just staring at Marina. The girl Marina called him and asked if he was really one of those who liked such things. She bit off the tip of the tentacle that was in her mouth. The main character, named Rain, looked away, embarrassed, and said seriously, blushing, that of course it wasn't like that. He nervously raised his hands up and, with his mouth open, shouted that it wasn't like that at all, and he was just assessing the situation to save her. The squid turned Marina around and opened his beak. The girl Marina, with a calm face, said that if he wanted to save her, he had better hurry, otherwise she would be eaten. The girl Marina looked at the main character, Rain, with a grin. The main character named Rain was wary and very scared of what was happening before his eyes. He grabbed his sword sharply and struck the squid, deftly cutting it into pieces. He sat down on the ground with a menacing look, holding Marina in his arms. The main character, Rain, said that he would not give her to anyone. He smirked as the girl Marina held her protector tenderly by the neck. After some time, the girl Marina finally tied the last knot on her dress. They sat on the beach, and the girl Marina apologized to Rain for her mistake. She looked guiltily at the main character, Rain, and then said that it was all her fault and that she had caused him problems. The main character, named Rain, smiled slightly and blushed, saying that it was not true and that it was his fault that he did not save her right away. The girl Marina stood up and said that everything was fine and she would be more careful next time. The main character, named Rain, looked at her with a smile. A moment later, the squid grabbed her again and dragged her into the water. The girl Marina, with hope in her eyes, reached out to the young guy, but the main character named Rain stood in a stupor and did not know what to do. The squid took off her clothes again, and the girl Marina opened her mouth in fear. The main character named Rain desperately called out her name, and the girl Marina still calmly asked him for help while birds were flying above them. Thus, they got a little trouble on their hands. A week later, there were already many barrels of medicine on the village street. Thanks to this medicine, the disease finally retreated from the villagers, which was expected from the hero's son, but no one saw him that morning. Passers-by looked with surprise and some indignation at how the main character named Rain and his girlfriend Marina were lying tiredly under a tree. They were so busy fighting the disease that the main character Rain had a breakdown. The protagonist Rain looked very exhausted and tired. They realized that dehydration was the main cause of death among infected people, and in that case, they just needed to moisturize them. That's why they brought in salt and made a kind of saline solution. They got this solution by mixing water with salt. It helps for a while, but the disease itself is still there, and they don't have much salt left, let alone strength. The maid, May, stood behind the counter, slightly bent over from a sharp and intense pain in her back. After some time, the girl Marina asked if the main character named Rain was okay. The girl Marina was on all fours on the ground with a tremor in her body. The main character named Rain asked what about herself with a tired and exhausted look. Marina collapsed on her side, exhausted, saying that she was not okay. The protagonist, Rain, closed his eyes, thinking that this was definitely true since she had been making water with magic all this time. The young man buttoned up his jacket. The girl Marina looked at him and said that she wouldn't survive this if she didn't flirt with Rain now. The main character, Rain, asked helplessly what it was, even though he himself could not move. The girl Marina said that she had hoped for it. The main character, named Rain, reluctantly crawled up to Marina and agreed. The girl Marina opened her eyes and looked at the main character, Rain. He took her tenderly and lovingly in his arms and pressed her as close to himself as possible, leaning his back against a tree. He asked the young girl if this was what she wanted. The girl Marina smiled sweetly at him, hugged the young man, and pressed herself even closer to his chest, saying that the main character named Rain is warm. The main character named Rain blushed and looked away, saying that she shouldn't hug him so tightly. His hand is in a dangerous place between her thighs, and the young girl's clothes have slipped off her chest. The main character named Rain raised his head up and called Marina, but she did not answer him, so he called her again. The girl Marina was still sitting in his arms, with her eyes closed. The main character named Rain looked at her and thought that she had fallen asleep, probably because she was very tired. His eyes were slowly closing too, and he thought that he was also feeling a little sleepy. Rays of light were filtering through the branches and leaves of the trees, and the outline of a man with elf ears was visible. The protagonist, Rain, thought it was nice to see the sun shining through the trees, and then noticed the elf ears. He saw an elf girl with incredibly beautiful ears in front of him, who was reaching out to the main character, Rain, to kiss him. After that, a loud scream was heard, and the elf girl fell to the ground with a crash. The main character, Rain, was followed by his father, who asked what happened. The main character, named Rain, looked at his father with an angry expression. He held the elf tightly, saying that he had caught a suspicious person. The girl was trembling. She loudly asked to let her go. The father looked at his son with confusion, asking again about the suspicious person. The main character, named Rain, said that he was sitting under a tree and was almost attacked by this unknown lady, who suddenly appeared from the bushes. The maid, named May, picked up Marina in her arms, and the girl Marina hung her hands down. The maid, named May, asked the protagonist, Rain, if this girl could be the culprit of everything. The protagonist, named Rain, looked at the maid, named May, and smiled a little nervously, and said that it didn't look like it. The elf girl looked at the main character, Rain, with a serious face and some indignation, and told the young man that this was a misunderstanding, then asked him to listen to her. The father frowned and asked, "Why?" Then she climbed to him and called her Lolina. The main character, named Rain, loudly ordered her to confess, continuing to hold her. After the main character, named Rain, abruptly stopped and stood in a stupor, the protagonist, named Rain, frowned and said that this couldn't be true. He asked his father if he had named her Lolina. He asked in shock if this was the famous healer Lolina-san. He imagined Lolina's image. Lolina looked at the protagonist, Rain, and said with a smirk, that's why she told him to listen to her. She then added, asking if he found this pose embarrassing. Lolina was sitting with her legs spread. The main character, named Rain, blushed deeply and let Lolina go, apologizing to her. Lolina adjusted her dress with a displeased look. Her father looked at her seriously, saying that he was glad she came. Lolina stood up and said that she and Religus had not seen each other for a long time. Lolina stood in front of the protagonist, Rain's father, and said that they had not seen each other since the defeat of the demonic dragon. The father smiled and said that it was true, and that he was saved by her then. The main character, named Rain, looked at them in surprise, thinking that she was the one who saved his father, and she must be an amazing magician. Lolina smiled slightly, even with some awkwardness, and said that it brings nostalgia. Lolina recalled what happened, raised her finger up and said with a smile that tirelessly regenerating crushed organs, reconnecting torn limbs again and again. For the first time, she was afraid that her magical power might run out. Lolina waved her hand and said it was funny when half of his head was torn off. Father smiled and said that he definitely experienced a completely new feeling then. The main character, named Rain, looked at them from afar, saying that the 7 heroes were really dangerous. The protagonist, named Rain, asked why Lolina tried to kiss him. Lily looked at the protagonist, Rain, and blushed deeply, saying that he had misunderstood. She tried to explain to them that he looked like he was running out of mana, so she was just trying to share it with him. She shyly pressed her hands to her chest and said that she was not interested in him. Her father stood behind her and apologized to her for distracting her, then said that it was time for them to heal the villagers. Lolina, remembering this, made a serious and unperturbed face. She waved her hand and began to chant, calling upon the wind that had made a pact with her to direct the healing powers of the forest to those suffering from the disease. She closed her eyes and began to cough as she chanted. Lolina squatted down, and tears suddenly appeared in her eyes. Lolina, covering her mouth with her hands, thought that she had stumbled, biting her tongue while speaking. Father, a little disappointed, put his hand on his forehead. Her father looked at her menacingly and said that he never thought that she couldn't use magic without pronunciation. The main character, named Rain, smiled a little nervously while looking at her. Lolina said that it wasn't exactly like that. One of the 7 heroes, Lolina-sama, is majestic and beautiful. Her spellcasting is as beautiful as the chirping of a bird. Lolina awkwardly covered herself with her arms, crossing them slightly over her stomach, and said that since everyone in the tavern was talking about it, she began casting spells to keep her image intact. She raised her finger and summoned the magic ball without any problem. She said that it was not easy for her to get used to it. Then she called the command Cure, full recovery, and a magical force swept over the village. Flower petals were flying in the air, but behind them, some buildings in the village were visible. The main character named Rain raised his hand at chest level in the air and looked at the petals with interest. This is the highest level of healing magic. People felt relieved. Everything would be fine now. Lolina said that she had heard that this disease was like a curse. Surprisingly, it did not cause that much harm. The father said that it was all thanks to the medicine made by Rain, and that this was expected of his son. The main character, Rain, stood aside. Lolina placed her hand on his shoulder and said that nothing less was expected from Religus' son. The protagonist, Rain, smiled a little nervously. After that, she suddenly froze and looked at her father with visible shock on her face, after which she asked him if he was really his son. The main character named Rain, pressing his arms along his body, awkwardly said that he was his son. The father asked in surprise if he hadn't told her. Lolina put her hands on her hips in displeasure and said that he had never said that he had, let alone married. The main character, Rain, looked at her a little angrily. Lolina looked first at the main character, Rain, then at his father, and thought that if you look at it like that, the eyes, the nose, are not similar, and in fact their faces themselves are not similar. She thought that maybe he got his face from his mother, and she felt a little sad. The children crowded around the protagonist, Rain, and he played with them with a smile, who thanked him for the medicine. Lolina thought that it was unlikely, but she could not shake the feeling of the atmosphere. Lolina tenderly stroked the main character Rain's head, and with a warm smile told the young man that he looked very much like Religus. The main character, named Rain, asked the girl in surprise if that was true. They looked at his father, who was playing with the children, and Lolina said that he too always did things recklessly for others, and that was why he was always broke, and also he couldn't use healing magic, and because of that, she was worried about him. The main character, named Rain, looked at Lilin and started talking about what would happen if he could use healing magic. But he didn't have time to finish because Lolina hugged him, and he buried his face in her curves, causing him to blush. Lolina, lightly hugging and pressing the main character Rain to herself, smiled and told him that like father, like son, and that they were both very good-natured. Lolina placed her hand on his head and said that she would teach him healing magic some other time. But now he needed to rest. The protagonist, Rain, thanked her and raised his hand sharply. He grabbed her by the clothes. Lolina blushed, looking at him a little indignantly. The main character, Rain, pulled the clothes off her chest and pressed himself against her in a completely calm manner. Then he pushed her to the ground and she screamed. Her legs lifted up, and her dress lifted up with them, and the curves hung almost on her face. She worriedly asked him to stop, experiencing her image as one of the 7 heroes. Her father looked at them in shock. Lolina closed her eyes while the protagonist named Rain held her in that position with his grip. She said that her image would be destroyed. The protagonist named Rain smiled contentedly. Thus, thanks to the efforts of the protagonist Rain and others, the village was saved. After some time, the girl Marina was hanging out the laundry on a line outside. The main character named Rain looked out the window and whined, with his mouth open, and said that it was a very peaceful morning. Suddenly, he noticed someone in the forest and became wary. Wondering who it could be, he called Marina and said that there was someone in the forest and she needed to go check. The girl Marina looked at him, then waved her hand and threw ice crystals. Suddenly, someone screamed very loudly in the forest. The main character, Rain, quickly threw on his jacket and thanked Marina. She, with a calm face, only gestured that everything was fine. The main character named Rain saw Lolina near a tree, who was clearly scared. She lifted her leg and her dress lifted up with it, and sharp crystals were stuck into the tree on the sides, and she caught one of the crystals with her teeth. Lolina, indignant and frightened, shouted at them not to do that again. She asked if he thought it was dangerous. The protagonist, Rain, apologized and said that he had mistaken her for a suspicious person. Lolina asked if his father and maid were here. The protagonist named Rain calmly said that they were still cleaning up the village, so he hadn't returned yet. Lolina freed herself from the ice crystals and said with a slight smile that this was exactly why she had come, and that while she still could, she wanted to see his wife, or to be more precise, his mother. The main character named Rain started talking about his mother a little sadly, after which he smiled slightly after the memories that came to his mind, and then said that there was no such person here, because he was an abandoned child. Lolina was stunned and said that if it had been a cat or a dog, she would have picked it up, but she would never pick up a child. She said that in that case, She was sure that he was picked up on a rainy day. The main character, named Rain, asked her in surprise why she decided so. Lolina had a slight grin on her face and said that this is the first thing that comes to mind, judging by the name of his equipment. The name is the main character named Rain. The weapon is a fire sword, a windshield, and uses the power of the wind. She put her finger to her lips thoughtfully and said that the fact that there was no blood relation meant that his skills with magic and swordsmanship were the result of his training, and perhaps he could learn it then. The main character, Rain, asked in surprise what she meant by learn. Lolina raised her finger and summoned a magic ball. She said she meant healing magic and asked if she had promised to teach it to him. The main character named Rain reached out to Marina and offered to teach her together. The girl Marina asked the young guy in surprise if she could. Lolina patted her on the head and said that she could do it without any problems, and that she had heard that the girl Marina was capable of magic. She said that she would teach them in turns. She moved away from them a little and told the main character Rain to put his hand in front of him, and she put it out herself. The main character named Rain put his hand in front of him and asked if he was doing it right. Lolina said that everything was fine. She said to take this and clench it with his teeth. The main character named Rain took the small piece of wood in his teeth and looked at Lilin with confusion. Suddenly, she swung a dagger at him with a menacing look. The main character, named Rain, became wary, but then grabbed the dagger with his fingers, preventing himself from being hurt. Lolina looked at him sternly, saying that if he defended himself, nothing would work, and he would not be able to heal without getting hurt. The protagonist, Rain, frowned and asked her to wait a bit. He grinned uncertainly and asked why they couldn't use his finger. Lolina frowned and asked discontentedly to let her tell him the words of a certain sage. She quoted the words, "Stab yourself with a knife, and you will be given healing power." The protagonist named Rain smiled a little nervously and thought that something like this would be said by an old-fashioned reincarnator just for the atmosphere. Lolina swung her dagger again and said that it opened. The protagonist named Rain looked at her warily, and Lolina sharply thrust the dagger into his palm and looked at him with a satisfied grin as he winced in pain and grabbed his wrist. The girl Marina called out to the main character Rain in concern. The main character Rain sat down on the ground, and Lolina put her arm around his shoulders, sternly telling him not to panic and that she would cast a healing spell right away. The girl Marina looked at them in panic. The girl Marina took his wounded hand in her hand and said that this spell only fights pain, and he should remember what it was like when she heals his wound. After Lilin looked at something in shock, saying that this can't be. The protagonist named Rain looked at his now healed arm. Lilin asked in shock if he had just used healing magic. The girl Marina hugged the main character Rain tightly with a happy smile on her face, saying that the main character named Rain is amazing. Lilin thought that it usually takes several years of training to heal a wound, and to do it successfully the first time. She looked at the protagonist Rain seriously, thinking that he shouldn't stay here. She called out to them and asked them seriously if they wanted to go to Raybolt's magic school. The main character, named Rain, and the girl Marina looked at her in confusion. Lolina said that there were many children his age in this school, and within the framework of the training of that school, they both would learn to use their abilities in general. After her words, his mouth opened slightly. Lolina said that first of all, the dual attribute of attack magic and healing magic, as well as swordsmanship and physical skills, equal to those of a holy knight, and even imitating alchemy, and it is impossible for a human. The main character named Rain looked at her with a helpless look and said that it was impossible, and that was what was stopping her from doing it. If you try, you might succeed, and if you don't try, nothing will work out, is what he thought. The main character named Rain said that there was a fool who said the same thing, and he was a hero who helped the poor. Lolina said that since he was still young, he might abuse his powers. With the blade he wielded, the enemy became a piece of meat, and his fire magic is so strong that it burns even the soul. The robe that was once pure white became red and black. If he saw someone as powerful as him, the protagonist named Rain asked with interest whether he was a hero or a villain, what he looked like, and whether it could be a human. Lolina said that she doesn't know, but the school was created to prevent something like this from happening. Lilin's face turned slightly red and she smiled sweetly, saying that there were many beautiful boys and girls there. The main character named Rain was surprised, and Marina felt disgusted. The protagonist, Rain, smiled awkwardly and said he needed time to think. Lolina said she planned to stay for 3 more days, which would give him just the time. After some time, it was night. The main character named Rain was lying on Marina's lap and said that maybe they should go to her after all, and asked Marina what she thought about it. The girl Marina looked away and said that she would follow Rain. The main character named Rain smiled and said that she didn't seem to be happy about it and asked if she hated school. The girl Marina put her hand on her lap. The girl Marina looked at the main character Rain a little sadly, saying that it was not about that and she was just lonely. The main character named Rain asked her what she meant by lonely. The girl Marina recalled how she sat alone at a desk and no one talked to her. She said that she was always lonely. The girl Marina said that she always just watched others having fun, and that's why she thought about it all the time. Some of the girls even invited their friends to karaoke. The girl Marina said that if the main character named Rain had been there then, she would have been happy. The girl Marina recalled how she looked at the flowers that showed that the main character named Rain had finished his life. The main character, named Rain, worriedly apologized to her and said that he did not remember anything from his past life. The girl Marina said that it was not about that. She blushed slightly and said that she had always dreamed of going to school with Rain, and that was why she was happy. The main character named Rain said that was why she had such a strange reaction. The girl Marina nodded. She said that she was worried that there might be a lot of girls there, and that's why she wanted to know. The girl Marina approached the main character Rain and asked if the main character Rain had any feelings for her and if he liked her. She approached his face and tears appeared in her eyes. The main character named Rain said no. He reached for her sweet lips and said that he loved her. The main character named Rain gently hugged her waist and passionately touched her lips. But suddenly the window opened, and flower petals flew into their room. The main character, named Rain, put Marina on the bed and kissed her tenderly. The girl Marina slightly wiggled her legs. After some time, the main character, named Rain, moved away a little, and saliva stretched between them. The main character, named Rain, took off her clothes and started kissing her body. The girl Marina asked him to stop, stuttering a little. The main character, named Rain, moved away from her. She raised her head and saw that he looked like a predator, thinking that the main character named Rain had turned into a wolf. The main character named Rain started to please Marina again. He went down lower, and the girl Marina made sounds. Suddenly, the girl Marina became wary and asked him to stop. The main character named Rain suddenly let in his magic, and the girl Marina opened her mouth, pressing her hand to herself. After some time, the sound stopped. The main character named Rain called out to Marina and tried to find the words. He looked at Marina, who was lying in front of him with her legs bent, a little guiltily and with some concern, and asked if she was okay. The young girl lay there without strength and was trembling from fatigue, and there was still a slight blush on her cheeks. She sat up, snuggling gently against him, running her finger down his chest, and said she was fine and she could remember up to about the 18th time. The main character, Rain, blushed slightly and apologized. After some time, the main character named Rain turned to Marina and thoughtfully said that he wondered if they could become like the 7 heroes if they tried hard at school. The girl Marina listened to him with interest. She turned to him and said that if this is what the main character named Rain dreams of, then it will be so, and everything that a reincarnated person wishes for when he returns to life comes true. She said with a serious face that she wished to meet Rain. The protagonist named Rain was surprised how she came here and said this thought out loud. He frowned a little and thought that if he thought about it like that, he had a wish. A slight sadness appeared on his face, and he remembered that he had asked to be reborn as a popular man with a harem. He wondered if this was what he had wished for. The girl Marina asked about the popular harem life with a slight misunderstanding. The main character named Rain began to explain with some excitement what he had said before, saying that great people have a great love for sensual pleasures. The girl Marina covered herself with a blanket and mockingly asked if he got his brains from Pow Pow. This was a strong blow to the main character Rain. Thus, he learned his lesson, even before going to school. Be careful not to overdo it. From the memories of the work of a maid, it can be said that the day of a maid is very tense and stressful. It begins with washing, then cleaning and cooking, but the girl Marina did not put in much effort. The maid, whose name was May, scolded her, saying that she had not hired her to eat apples here. The protagonist, Rain, was curious about Marina's storage that she carried with her. It can store almost anything. He noticed that she never showed what was inside her vault. He decided to open it, and to his surprise, inside was the same kitten they had met on the beach. The main character named Rain looked in shock at the cat, who was reaching out to him with his paw and wondered if it was Schrödinger. You could see surprise and incomprehension on his face. The cart pulled up to the house. Rain said that it was time for them to leave. Marina answered him that it was good. Religus and May pounced on the girl and the boy and began to hug them. Religus began to cry and shouted that he was already waiting for them to grow up in the academy. May also began to cry and said that they should be careful in the city. Let them not even try to drink raw water and listen to strange men. Religus turned to Lolina and said that they were leaving their protection to her. The girl replied that she was one of the 7 heroes going with Marina and Rain, so there was no need to worry. The heroes left. They had to stop because Lolina felt sick. Rain said that he was asking for forgiveness. Lolina answered tiredly that she had never been particularly fond of transport. Rain asked the girl why she decided to accompany them. Marina innocently said that not only did Lolina have an extra chromosome, but it was also useless. Lolina angrily asked that Marina was not speaking too rudely. Rain decided not to continue the argument and said that in any case, they needed to continue their journey quickly. The guy thoughtfully said that if bandits attacked them in such a place, Marina interrupted him and told him to look up. The guy raised his head and saw the inscription. "Come on, a gang of orc bandits." Marina and Rain thought that these were the ones who would attack them. They heard laughter and shouts behind them that they were unlucky to stand here. The girl and the guy turned their heads and saw the gang. At the head stood a girl who shouted that this forest was the territory of their band of orc bandits. There was no need to put up useless resistance. They were captured. The girl jumped up and down joyfully and shouted that she had said it today without even biting her tongue. All the bandits shouted joyfully. One of them shouted that they had expected nothing less from the eldest Karen. Rain looked at them in shock and also took his papers, on which it was written that this forest was the territory of their band of orc bandits. The guy awkwardly interrupted the girl and asked what would happen to them in captivity. The bandits surrounded Karen and made scary faces. The girl with a sweet smile said that they would take their food and treasures and sell the women into slavery, but they would not kill. You can be calm. Marina and Rain approached Lolina. The guy asked what he could do to distract her for a minute. The girl asked what was wrong. Rain pointed at Karen and said that he needed a measure of protection from an attack like them. Lolina looked at the bandit and replied that it was the same with them as with demons or wild animals. If they took the law into their own hands, there would be no problems. Lolina continued to say that in her country, criminals can be sold into slavery, and for those captured alive, they give a reward in gold. Rain asked how much they paid for it. Lolina answered that about 3,000 gold for one. The guy remembered what May had said. The girl told him before leaving that every month she and his father would send 50,000 gold. Rain turned to the bandits and said happily that it was decided. He would deal with them on the money engine. Lolina put her hand on his shoulder and said in horror that this was not necessary. Lolina loudly asked what he wanted to do with this forest as a battlefield. He wanted the reward, so he couldn't kill them in the process. Rain said that she should do it herself. Lolina said in horror that he should understand that fighting was the only thing she was bad at, so she would leave it to them. Rain said fine. The boy approached the gang. Karen, surrounded by her minions, asked sweetly that they had finally finished their whispering. Rain sternly said that he, as a man who aspires to be a hero, cannot turn a blind eye to villains. Rain took out his sword and shouted that they should get ready, a gang of useless orcs. Karen shouted resentfully that they were orcs robbers. What kind of useless? Rain asked if it was really true. Rain said loudly that he wished they would obediently surrender without fighting, but he knew that wouldn't happen. Karen looked at him angrily and shouted, "No." Bandits started attacking them from behind. The criminals shouted that they were now being targeted, but it was too late to apologize. Rain quickly turned around and prepared for battle. Rain thought that he couldn't deal the bandits a fatal blow, he just had to neutralize them. If he held back just enough, Rain lightly touched the bandits with his sword. The criminals flew away from him, screaming a few meters. Karen scratched her head and looked at her friends in surprise and wondered what had just happened. Rain shouted to Lolina that he was asking for forgiveness, but the bandits weren't dead. The girl approached the criminals and said that he should calm down, he was on a string, but everything was fine. Rain was attacked by a bandit with an axe. The criminal raised his weapon high and shouted that he was just a little boy. No need to act like a hero. Rain gripped the hilt of his sword tightly and thought that this was bad. If attacked from behind, he would not be able to hold back. The robber was attacked by water, it completely covered his head, and he began to drown. Rain saw how Marina controlled the water. The guy joyfully shouted that he was very grateful to her. The other bandits excitedly shouted to Karen that at this rate they would lose. The girl angrily shouted that they should all attack at once. Marina poured water on the ground where the bandits were standing. Rain saw this and touched the ground. The guy summoned lightning. All the robbers were paralyzed. Karen ran up to her friends and angrily shouted at Rain that he was a swordsman. It was unfair to use magic as well. The guy said tiredly that he didn't want to hear the words unfair from a bandit. Karen angrily stuck the magic artifact into the ground. She angrily screamed that then she would also pull out her ace from her sleeve. It was too late to regret her choice. Suddenly the ground began to shake and break into small stones. Rain screamed in shock. What was that? A huge stone monster crawled out of the ground. Rain stared at him in surprise and thought that he had seen him in a book before, the same dragon golem. The monster stood behind Karen and waited for her command to attack. Karen happily shouted that she had the advantage now. They didn't think she would just give up. The golem raised its leg above Karen to step on her. She didn't see it and happily shouted for the dragon golem to crush them. The girl turned her head, but the monster was already almost stepping on her. She didn't even have time to do anything. Rain managed to grab her in his arms and jump away from the danger. The guy continued to hold the girl in his arms. He looked at the monster and thoughtfully said that he was more dangerous than you might think. Rain stood in front of Lolina, shocked Karen, and told her to hide it somewhere. Lolina responded in surprise that it was fine, but he shouldn't act crazy here. Rain looked at Marina and shouted loudly that they should deal with him. The girl summoned water and raised her hands up. Marina responded that she understood everything. Marina completely covered the monster with water. Rain jumped high into the air and set his sword on fire. He threw it at the monster, who was trying to fight the water. Rain shouted for him to defeat him with his fire sword. The monster began to retreat back into the ground. He could no longer fight. Moraine ran up to Rain and hugged him, saying that it was a successful success. Rain sighed tiredly. Lolina and Karen screamed in shock. What just happened? Rain awkwardly replied that it was just a steam explosion. Lolina was unsure and asked that it was water and fire magic. He held back, but the power was still amazing. Karen blushed and awkwardly asked why he saved her. Did he really? Rain interrupted her and loudly replied that if she died, he would not be able to collect the reward for her. Karen came up to him and said, okay, she lost this time, now he has to accept it. The girl grabbed his jacket and kissed him on the cheek. Rain blushed and cried out in embarrassment. What did she just do? Karen responded in surprise. What? She was so grateful to him for saving her from the monster. Marina grabbed Karen by the hair and said angrily that lying was not good. The girl took a knife out of her pocket. Marina looked at Karen and asked loudly what it was. Karen made an innocent face and answered that she knew nothing about this dagger with paralyzing poison. Rain said with a wicked smile that that was it. She wanted to stab the man she owed her life to in the back. Marina said furiously that a severe punishment was necessary. Karen sweated and asked in horror what they were going to do with her. She thought that nothing should be done. Rain started pinching her. Karen screamed at him to stop. The guy replied that if she didn't apologize right now, he would continue to pinch her. Lolina hid in the bushes and covered her ears. Karen, with tears in her eyes, screamed that if he pinched her so hard, her prestige in the gang would suffer. Rain innocently asked what prestige there was in their useless gang. Marina said that this girl should be punished more. Rain asked Marina that she had a better idea. Tentacles appeared. They started tickling Karen. Rain asked in shock where she got the beach squid from. Marina replied that the inventory could also store animals. There was also a cat in it. Marina took out the cat to prove her words. Karen said tiredly that holding such a beast was just a nightmare, but she would not lose. She had to endure. The tentacles began to pinch and tickle her. Rain said that they would have to set up camp here today and spend the night. Marina said that there was nothing they could do about it. Karen screamed loudly that it was not necessary. 2 hours later, Karen got down on her knees and said that she would forgive her for everything. She ran up to Marina and hugged her. The girl said that although she was useless, she was a good girl for apologizing. Karen started crying and screaming that she was asking for forgiveness. The squid's tentacles started reaching out to Lolina. The girl asked Marina why the squid was coming to her. That's how their adventure in the forest on the way to the city ended. They managed to deal with the terrifying gang of useless bandits and defeated the monster. The heroes headed towards the gates of the city of Reincarnated. The guards noticed a cart approaching their city. One of the guards said in surprise that the cart was going too fast. His friend loudly asked if this was an attack. At the front of the carriage was Karen, who was tied with ropes. Rain turned his head towards Lolina. The guy shouted loudly that it would be bad if they flew into the city like that. Rain saw Lolina, who was feeling bad because she was constantly seasick. Marina said that they had already lost her. The cart crashed into the city gates. The guard said that it was impossible to rush around like that in a cart. Karen, with tears in her eyes, screamed that she was asking for forgiveness for this. Karen took out the mushrooms and handed them to the guard. The girl said that they could take them as an apology. The guard angrily said that she wanted to increase the punishment. She was giving him poisonous mushrooms. The guard turned to Lolina and said that she did not often come to their city. He asked if she had any business in the Order of Knights. The girl came closer to the knights. Marina answered that she had captured a group of bandits and wanted to receive a reward before entering the city. The knight asked with interest where these bandits were. Lolina said that one of them was here. She turned her head and saw Karen, who was hiding behind Marina. The girl said that there was no one here. Lolina grabbed Karen and walked up to the knights. She showed them the bag and said that the others were here. It was a magical vault. Anything could fit in it. The knight asked in surprise that she was joking. Lolina took the bandits out of the bag and said that here they were, and now they needed to count them so that she could collect the reward. The knight said in shock that he heard that it was not an equal battle. Also, that unknown mania, as expected from the heroine. Lolina replied that it was not so. Lolina put her hands on Marina and Rain's shoulders and said that she was not the one who caught them and used that magic. The two of them did it. The knight said in surprise that she shouldn't joke like that. Lolina asked him what he thought, that she was joking. This guy is the son of Religus. The knight simultaneously shouted that this couldn't be. They came closer to Lolina. The knight laughed and said that if it was the son of Lord Religus, he would believe it. Lolina laughed and said that it was true. Who, in their right mind, would not believe it? The knight said that it was good, then they would start checking. One of the knights approached Karen, who was in shackles. Marina looked at her sadly. Before leaving, Karen told her with a smile that although it was not long, it was fun. The knight returned to the room, saying that he apologized for the wait. He went to the counter and said that here was their reward, which was 10 million gold. Everyone stared in shock at the huge bag of gold. Lolina and Rain hugged each other in surprise. The guy screamed loudly that there was so much money. Lolina hysterically replied that they should calm down, it was only 10 million gold. The knight opened the journal and said something else about the bandits. It seemed that they used to be adventurers, but it was unclear why they stooped to robbery. The knight continued to say that they would be punished with forced labor, but the leader, Karen Ox, would be executed unless someone bought her as a slave. Rain replied that it was clear. The guy went to the hot springs. He happily said that he didn't think that you could still book something like that there. A group of people asked the knight why they let wanderers in. They added that they understood that they were adventurers, but that it was very rare for the entire premises to be booked. Lolina shouted through the wall that adventurers usually came here after receiving a reward. Rain replied with a smile that it was good that they caught this group of Neanderthals. Karen jumped on the wall and screamed that they weren't Neanderthals. He said that on purpose. Marina shouted for Karen to come down. It was dangerous. Lolina awkwardly said that Rain was cute and so similar to Religus. She couldn't believe that he spent his hard-earned money on such a purchase. Liliana looked at the girl. Karen screamed angrily. What do you mean such a purchase? She wanted to start a fight. Marina managed to grab her and calm her down. The girl began to wash it thoroughly. She asks why she is doing this to her. Next in line is Liana. The girls scream and fall on top of each other. Rain shouted that he was coming out. They could take their time. The guy was sitting at the table and waiting for the girls. When he saw them, he joyfully shouted that he was waiting for them here. Karen was dressed in new clothes. She shouted with a smile that she was sorry for the wait. The girl says that they didn't have her size, so she replaced it with a lace. The girl asked Rain how he liked her new outfit. If it was cute, he could praise it. Rain patted her head and awkwardly said that yes, it was very nice. Karen smiled and replied that she was very glad that he liked her new clothes. She had never seen clothes like this before. Lolina told Rain that she was sorry for keeping him waiting. The boy replied that there was no need to apologize. He had enjoyed a sumptuous dinner there. Karen looked at the floor and saw food. She said angrily that she was also very surprised. She was not even given a chair for a slave, but just the ground for her to eat on. Karen put her hands in the food and said in disappointment, "What the hell is this in the shape of meat?" Rain laughed awkwardly and said he thought it was edible. Maybe it was even tasty. Lolina looked at Karen and asked Rain why he bought it. He spent all his money on it. Rain said that they wanted to execute Karen and he felt sorry for her. Rain continued to say that she didn't seem like a bad girl, and Marina liked her. Besides, if you think about it, only they could pay that kind of money. Karen angrily screamed that she was not cheap. Lolina answered that then she should work off all the money spent. Marina stood up from her seat and put her hand on Karen's head. She told Lolina that Karen would become skilled. After all, she would be teaching her herself. Lolina said irritably, which didn't sound very convincing coming from her lips. Rain looked at Karen and asked with interest that she had parents. The girl answered with a smile that she didn't know. She had never seen them in her life. When she was a child, there was no one near the house except for the old man next to the oak tree. Lolina asked how she learned to speak human. Karen replied that when everyone was gone, she received a lollipop. She decided to eat it, and then began to talk. Lolina took out a piece of meat and handed it to Karen, saying that she was a good girl for saying that. As a reward, she would give her this mysterious meat. Lolina looked at Rain. The girl asked if he was going to use a chain on the slave. Rain replied that he didn't think she would be that naughty. Everything will be fine. Lolina and Rain looked at Karen. Marina wiped the sauce from Karen's cheeks. Lolina sighed tiredly and said that the rooms were booked, but there was also a slave with them. The girl added that he should be more careful. She could attack while he was sleeping. Rain answered with a smile that everything would be fine, no need to worry. Lolina came into the room and said in surprise that everyone had already fallen asleep. She looked at Karen and said that she had made it all up, she was still a child. She looked around the room and asked in surprise where her bed was. Lolina looked at the floor and saw the bed that was supposed to go to Karen as a slave. Lolina woke Karen up and screamed loudly that her bed was on the floor. Karen screamed loudly that she was asking for forgiveness. There were 3 days left until the entrance exams. The day of the entrance exams came. The heroes walked along the city street. Rain excitedly said that he was worried. Marina said that yes, she was also not calm. Rain asked where Lolina was. Marina said she had things to do and had left early. Rain said, "That's how it is." Marina said tiredly that she wanted to ask her to look after Karen. Karen sadly said that she doesn't want Lolina. She immediately starts scolding her. Rain awkwardly asked that it was probably because she was always making mischief. Karen said that she could still be alone for a while. The girl asked Rain that she just needed to wait for them at the gates of that castle. The guy answered that no, it was not a castle. Rain added that it was a school of magic. Karen stood next to the gate and waved goodbye. The guy said that it was time for them to go. Marina told Karen to be a good child and wait for them here. They approached the girl, and Raven asked where the registration for the entrance exam was. The girl looked at them with a smile and said that they had come to the right place, and now they had to fill out an application. Raven started filling in his name, where he lived, and the magic he could use. The boy picked up the sheet and asked if it would work. The girl said okay, now she would stamp it. She gave them 2 signs. The girl said that this was the end of their registration. This would be their pass to the exam. They should attach them in a visible place. Rain was tugged by the sleeve. He saw Karen handing him a sheet of paper with a drawing. She happily said that she had been able to write too. Rain asked in surprise what she was doing there. The guy added that she had to wait for them. Marina gave her the cat, saying okay. She would lend her the animal, but in return, Karen had to wait for them at the gate. Karen said she didn't want to, there was a dangerous cart next to them. Rain asked what dangerous meant. They went outside the gate and saw a cart pulled by cows. Karen said that he now sees that she is dangerous. Rain asked in shock why a cow. A bang laid a carpet in front of the cart. He shouted loudly that Lord Mew Griffithbear from the Imperial Court had arrived. They should step aside. Rain looked at his clothes and thought that there was a badge, which meant that he had also arrived for the exam. Mew angrily asked them that, didn't they hear that they had to step aside? They weren't going to listen to his order? Karen hid behind Rain and shouted that he wasn't listening to anyone's orders. Mew angrily said that their lives weren't important. Lolina came out. She said loudly that she was asking for the attention of the exam participants. She was a special examiner. The exam was about to begin. She was asking everyone to come to the exam venue. Rain thought in shock that Lolina meant this when she said she was going on business. All the participants were amazed by Lolina's beauty, and they couldn't wait to start the exam. Karen laughed loudly and shouted that Lolina was doing weird cosplay. Lolina said angrily that she should leave this place or it would get worse. Lolina looked at Marina and Rain and said sternly that she would tell them just in case not to even think about causing trouble here. Miyu looked angrily at Rain. Lolina shouted loudly that she asked everyone to move to the exam venue. Rain said in surprise that the exam would be in the arena. I wonder what they would do. Marina told Rain that this should not happen. He will cope. Lolina said to do everything as usual, and then everything will be fine. Rain felt Miyu's evil gaze. Lolina stood next to the huge doll. She said loudly that the exam was starting. The essence lies in this doll. They will measure everyone's magical power. Lolina continued to say that if you hit the stomach with magic, stars will come out. They can use their strongest magic. If more than 3 stars come out, then the exam is passed. The girl shouted loudly that they could begin. A guy came forward and began to call for fire, saying that hellfire rise before their eyes and burn the enemies. He released several fireballs at the doll. Stars started falling out of the doll. Someone shouted in surprise that it was really cool. He got 4 stars. Rain and Marina watched the exam from the stands. The guy asked in shock why they were pronouncing the spell so strangely. Marina replied that she didn't know, but it sounded vile. Miyu heard their conversation and said that this is how nobles cast the spell, and common people simply can't understand, but he agreed that they were vile. He would show real magic. The boy entered the arena and loudly said that he was the legitimate heir of the highest dignitary of the empire, and his name was Miyu Griffithbear. He began waving his arms and shouting for the wind to come and destroy the enemies before his eyes. The wind hit the doll. Stars began to fall from it. Someone shouted in surprise that 30 stars fell out at once. As expected from the heir of a dignitary, he is different from the others. Miyu squeezed his hand and the wind began to hit the doll harder. People started shouting that it was dangerous and they had to get out. Rain and Marina protected everyone from the blows of the wind that were directed at the people. Rain exhaled and said that he was scared. He couldn't dodge, so he had to cut. The guy looked at Mia and asked that he did it on purpose. Marina said angrily that he was definitely aiming at them. The girl turned to Rain and told him to go now. The guy awkwardly replied that okay, he was going. Rain approached Lolina and asked if he could use the magic sword. The girl replied that he couldn't. They weren't testing his sword skills here. The crowd began to whisper. One of the guys laughingly asked that he wanted to use a magic sword, but he was not religious. He was told that he took out a sword out of fear. Coming to a magic school with a sword is terrible. Marina heard their words and got angry. The girl whispered to Rain that he should gather magic in one hand. She thought he could do it. Rain confidently replied that he would try. Rain stood in front of the doll and thought that even this was not possible at full strength. He must aim with one hand and do everything smoothly. It is necessary to reduce the damage as much as possible. Rain shouted loudly, calling down lightning. Lightning struck the doll, throwing it back and breaking through the wall. Rain awkwardly asked how many stars he had received. The doll released black smoke. Everyone screamed in shock that something similar to the Milky Way came out. Lolina said thoughtfully that he had received about 10 billion. Rain asked in surprise what she had been able to calculate. The girl replied that yes, she once tried to measure Religus's power, and it turned out to be an entire universe. That is, 1,000 trillion stars. Lolina walked up to the broken wall and said that he didn't expect his son to destroy the school. Rain tiredly told her to stop. One of the girls blushed and said that Lolina said that he was Religus's son. Marina raised her hand and said that she would be next. Lolina told her that this was the last doll, so she should not break it. The crowd began to whisper that perhaps she was also capable of something, since she was friends with the hero's son. Maria used her power, and the doll's eyes fell off. Lolina screamed loudly, "What kind of magic was that?" Just like that, they passed the exam that Lolina gave. Marina was a little girl who was accosted by two boys. One of them asked the crying girl what she was hearing. His friend asked Marina why she didn't have parents. Marina started crying because she wanted them to leave her alone. A guy with a bag on his head ran out. He hit two hooligans with all his might. The boys shouted that they couldn't hurt Marina. The masked hero wouldn't spare them. The hooligans started running away. One of them shouted that this was the second orphan. Marina sat down on the ground from stress. The boy took the box off his head, and it turned out to be Rain. He said angrily that he asked her to call him if she was bullied. Rain extended his hand to her and said that a hero is someone who always and everywhere saves others from villains. Rain opened his eyes, and it turned out that it was just a dream. The guy fell asleep on Marina's lap. He blushed and jumped away from her. Rain screamed loudly that he was asking for forgiveness. He didn't know when he had fallen asleep. Marina answered that everything was fine. The girl added that he looked beautiful in his sleep. He is always beautiful while he sleeps. Rain blushed and thought that he looked terrible when he slept. Lilin came up to them. The girl happily said that she had finally found them. Lolina asked what they were doing there. Marina replied that nothing. Lolina said that the chief examiner said that they had an interview scheduled. Rain said in surprise that it was time to start. Lolina looked at Marina's revealing clothes and said that it was forbidden to go in such a form. The girl replied that she was comfortable in it. Lolina grabbed Marina and dragged her to her. She told the girl that it was forbidden she would give her her clothes. Lolina looked at Rain and told him to go to the hall. Rain awkwardly replied that it was fine. He walked into the hall and thought that he had had a very strange dream. The head of the academy came out and said that he apologized for the wait. He looked at Marina and asked who she was. The girl was sitting next to Rain and Eiyuu in a shark costume. The head asked what she was doing here, dressed like that. Lolina whispered that she had borrowed a costume from the theater, and it was the only one that fit her. The leader asked why she hadn't given him something of her own. Marina raised her hand and said that Liling's clothes were not suitable. They were too small. The leader told Liling that he understood the situation. Now they could return to the exam. The leader said loudly that everyone had done well in the practical exam. This interview is to select 7 participants for the scholarship. He added that since its inception, there have been no people who fit the criteria. He was quite surprised that 3 people passed this year, so he would like to ask them one question. The leader asked how they planned to use such a powerful force. Eiyuu raised his hand and stood up from his seat. He began to say with a smile that this question might be burdensome for common people. The guy added that he should be the first to answer it. Eiyuu cleared his throat and began to say that everyone knew that his family, the Grando Principality, had become one of the 3 great principalities. Eiyuu continued to say that they had risen so high in one generation due to his father's high intelligence and hard work. The invisible magic he possessed was not something he was born with. The boy said that this was also the result of his father's rigorous training. Therefore, he too would become someone who would not tarnish the name of the Gryffindors. Just like his father, he would make a great contribution to the aristocratic company. The leader looked at Mia and replied that he was grateful for his answer. It was a great speech. Eiyuu raised his chin proudly and replied that of course he was an aristocrat. The leader asked the next person to answer. Marina raised her hand and stood up from her seat. Marina blushed and replied that she just wanted to be Rain's girlfriend. Lolina thought wearily that she was still flouting the rules. The leader asked in shock that before that, it turns out, she decided to become a shark. Rain stopped Marina and shouted that they should not listen to her. Rain started waving his arms and shouting that Marina was already his maid, so she would always be with him. Lolina said that she thought Marina meant that she wanted to be Rain's assistant. The leader said that this is what it meant. How? He asked Rain what he wanted to be. Rain nervously replied that he wanted to be like his father. He wanted to be one of the 7 heroes, like Ligus, Karis. Rain continued to confidently say that he also wants to become a beloved hero for people. The leader looked at the boy intently and asked Rain to answer one more question. The leader asked what would happen if the 7 great heroes became enemies with each other. Would his will not change? Rain thought in shock that the 7 heroes would become enemies, then he and the father. Rain's thoughts were interrupted by Marina, who called him. Rain confidently said that even if his father becomes his enemy, his will not change. After all, a hero is someone who always and everywhere saves others from villains. Marina happily hugged Rain and shouted that he was so cool. The guy laughed and said that he was grateful to her for these words. Marina asked with interest that these were not by any chance words from his past life. Rain answered uncertainly that most likely they were. He heard them in today's dream. Miyu shouted angrily that they were making fun of him now. Miyu angrily asked that all these pompous words were taken from a dream. It seemed that this was all they were capable of. It was as if these 7 great heroes had accidentally arrived at the scene of the demonic dragon's attack. Miyu asked what was the reason for them running away as soon as they received their reward. Rain laughed and awkwardly replied that he didn't think his guess was right. Miyu furiously asked what was wrong with it. Miyu cried out to rebuild the city, which had suffered great damage. The 3 great principalities put in all their wealth and efforts. That's why they were proclaimed rulers. Miyu continued shouting that the heroes saved people, took the reward, and that's it. And then what? If it weren't for the help of the principalities, no one would even remember the heroes. Marina angrily said for him to shut up. He dare not insult Rain's dreams. The girl created stones which leaned their sharp ends against Miyu's neck. The guy grabbed the stone and asked what it meant. Marina answered that he understood everything himself. Miyu angrily said that if she raised her hand against him, their house would be wiped off the face of the earth. Miyu unleashed a hurricane on Marina without warning. The girl stared at the guy in horror and thought that he had just summoned power without a spell. She wouldn't have time to dodge. Rain managed to stand in front of Marina and parried Miyu's blow. The guy started shaking and asked in shock that he had just dispelled his magic with his bare hands. That just couldn't be happening. Rain said angrily that he was apologizing for Marina's disrespect. He didn't know who was really in the wrong. Rain grabbed Mia's hand and squeezed it hard. Rain looked at Mia and said that this power should not be used against allies. It should be used to protect those dear to oneself. Miyu looked at Rain. Lolina stood between the boys and shouted that it was enough. The interview was still not over. If there was anything to talk about, then we should leave it for later. Now, let them go back to their place. Lolina slipped and hit Mia in the jaw. She pulled the others towards her, and they all fell in a heap. Lolina asked in shock what had just happened. The leader and his assistant left the hall. Before leaving, the leader told Lolina that they were entrusting the rest to her, and it was time for them to go. Marina and Rain walked towards the gate where Karen was standing. Rain happily shouted to her that they were back. Karen asked if the exam was over. The girl looked at Marina, who was dressed in a Cerberus shark costume. Karen screamed in surprise that Marina had become so cool. She took Marina's hand and said that she could knock Lolina down too. Marina said that Rain had already knocked Lolina down. Karen jumped on Rain's shoulders and screamed that he needed to tell her how to take down Lilin. Rain replied that he thought it would be difficult for Karen. They headed home. And so, the day of the main characters ended. They successfully passed the exam. They also managed to defeat one of the 7 heroes, Lolina. Now, even more travels await them. Karen and Marina were in the bathroom. Marina was washing the girl's hair. She told her that she was a good girl for standing guard quietly today. Karen was very pleased with the praise. Karen happily shouted that yes, she could handle everyone. Marina looked at Karen's taming, which was hanging around her neck. The girl touched it. Marina asked Karen where she got this thing from. Karen answered that she got it from her uncle whom she saved in the city. Marina made a serious face and asked what it meant. She should tell in detail. Karen began her story. She said that it happened while she was waiting for them. Karen was sitting near the gate with the cat and singing a song. She said loudly that she was on guard with the cat. Karen said tiredly that she was very hungry. She looked at the empty boxes and dirty cutlery. The girl said sadly that the bento that Marina gave was already finished. Karen sat down more comfortably on the ground and said that she wanted to go look for food, but if she left the post, she would be scolded. If only there was a replacement for her. The girl looked at the cat. Karen thought sadly that there was only a cat. The girl noticed the guard who was sleeping at the gate. Karen came up to him and called him. It said that the guard uncle should pay attention to her. Karen sat down on the ground next to him and began to watch him carefully. She screamed loudly once more that her uncle should wake up. The man woke up and stared at the girl in surprise. She happily told him that she had to go look for food, so he should replace her for a while. Karen took out her ID, which had a picture of a cat on it. Karen asked him with a sweet smile that he could hold the ID. The man grabbed the sheet of paper, but did not understand what the girl wanted from him. He just wanted to sleep. Karen started to run away, but as she left, she screamed that it was a request. The guard remained standing in place. She walked down the street and looked at people who were hurrying somewhere. Karen said sadly that she already regretted leaving. Karen stopped and said that she seemed to be lost. The cat jumped onto the box and then onto the wall. The animal began to meow loudly to attract attention. Karen looked at the cat in surprise and screamed that she had to go back. It was very dangerous there. The girl thought for a moment and hesitantly said, "Okay." She jumped onto the box and began to gradually climb up to the cat. Karen climbed the wall to get the cat. She screamed happily. It was high up here and everything was visible. She would definitely find something from here. Karen continued shouting that they would definitely find food there, they should go and see. The girl couldn't get down right away because the wall was too high. Karen and the cat were walking down the street. Karen said admiringly that there were so many shops here. She stopped at the shop and started looking at the swords. Then Karen went further and started looking at herbs and different bottles. They walked on. Karen said sadly that there was only inedible stuff here. Karen walked up to the clothing store. She placed her palms against the display case and said admiringly that this was a princess store. It looked really cool. She couldn't stop admiring the dresses when suddenly she smelled a delicious aroma. Karen sniffed and happily shouted that it was the smell of meat. She began to look around and noticed the tables. Karen said that the smell was coming from there. She walked up to the table and laid her head on it. The girl began to drool on the table and watch the man eat. The man looked at the girl and asked his friend who it was. His friend said that she was probably hungry. The man handed her a piece and asked if she wanted meat. He said that she could have a bite. He brought the meat to her mouth, but when she wanted to take a bite, the man quickly put the meat in his mouth. Karen looked at him upset. The man and his friend laughed loudly at the girl. He, with tears in his eyes from laughter, shouted that she really thought he would give her meat. Karen looked behind him and said that there was a beautiful girl there. They turned their heads and saw an old man leading in his cow. Karen, when they weren't looking, poured salt and pepper into their mugs. The men sighed in disappointment. The man said sadly that it happened. His friend said yes. They sipped some of the drink from their mugs and Karen watched them carefully. The men spat the drink at each other. Now they were both wet. The man wiped his mouth and angrily asked what just happened. Karen started laughing loudly and dancing. Karen screamed loudly that they were taking risks for letting their guard down. She laughed even louder and said that they should have seen their faces by now. The men looked at her angrily and thought she was terrible. One of them shouted that she wouldn't leave them so easily now. His friend shouted that she would answer for this. Karen started to run away, but not before shouting that she was asking for forgiveness. The men started running after her, shouting for her to stop. Karen replied that she definitely would not stop. Karen turned the corner and started running even faster. The man shouted that it was the slave who was getting on their nerves. They would never let her leave. She would be caught. Karen turned her head towards them and screamed that those who mock people are bad. Let them catch her if they can. The girl crashed into someone and screamed in pain. She sat on the ground and rubbed her bruised head. She looked at the man who was completely hidden in his square. Karen tried to see him. The man and his friends stopped. She happily asked Karen that she had nowhere else to run. His friend asked the girl that she wanted them to become her masters. The man asked his friend that they would teach her how to apologize properly. Karen screamed angrily that Rain wasn't as bad as them. They shouldn't even compare themselves to him. The man turned his attention to the man who was sitting at the table behind Karen. He asked who this man was. His friend asked him what was stopping them from grabbing the girl. The man pulled out his sword and said he hoped there would be no problems. His friend said that if he caused them any problems, They would teach him a lesson not to interfere again. The man in the cloak grabbed Karen and put her on his shoulders. The girl grabbed him by the neck in surprise. She didn't even know what to say in the situation she found herself in. The man rushed at the man in the cloak and shouted at him not to underestimate them. His friend shouted at him to prepare to fight the man. The man ran up to him and raised his sword high to attack Karen and the mysterious man. Karen and the man hit the bully, sending him flying several meters. His friends screamed that they were in trouble. He took out a magical artifact and began to read a spell. He said, "Roar, earth, give justice to the fools before him." Karen and the mysterious man looked at him in surprise. The man screamed for a rock fall. A huge rock appeared above the heads of Karen and her savior, which could easily crush them and leave nothing behind. The mysterious man raised his hand and touched the man. This caused it to shatter into thousands of pieces. Now they were saved from the danger that awaited them. The bully fell to the ground in surprise and stared ahead. They mockingly asked him if he still had the drive to attack them, or if he had decided to give up. The savior put Karen on the ground so that she wouldn't get hurt. The bully, shocked, asked who he was to deal with his magical power so easily. The mysterious man took off his hood and took Karen's hand. They walked away from the place together. The man said that he was just an old man passing by. The man and Karen were walking through the city. The girl was waving her arms cheerfully, and the man was following her. He asked with interest that Rain was the name of her master, to whom she belonged. Karen answered with a smile that she was not. She thought about the man's question for a while, and happily said that Rain was the head of a band of robbers who operated in the forest. The girl added that when she was almost executed, he bought her back, so she was saved. Karen took a bite of the meat the man gave her to satisfy her hunger. Karen stopped and turned her head towards her savior. Karen told him that he was also very cool, and also strong, because he saved her from the bandits. The girl looked at him carefully and said that she wanted the same clothes as him. She carefully watched what would happen next, but did not forget to eat. The man clenched his fists and said that she should let him say something. He knelt down and put his hands on her shoulders. Karen looked at him in surprise. The man said that she should look after Rain and the others. He took a piece of jewelry from his pocket and hung it around her neck. He added that it was a gift to her, as a memento of today. Karen smiled widely and shouted happily that he could rely on her to do this. That's how Karen met the mysterious man who saved her from the bullies. Karen happily climbed into the hot spring and happily told Marina that everything was like this. Marina looked at her in shock because the girl was talking about it so carelessly. Marina crept up behind her and raised her hands above her. She angrily asked Karen who was looking after the house. The girl did not expect to be scolded, so she rose from her seat in horror. Marina grabbed Karen by the leg and said angrily that Karen had left without asking when she should have stayed put. She had also caused a lot of trouble for the people. Marina added that it was time for her to receive her punishment for her hooliganism. She picked Karen up and threw her with all her might on the floor. Karen screamed loudly from her punishment. Meanwhile, the guard whom Karen had left in charge was approached by the chief's assistant and asked why he was working overtime today. The guard replied that he was looking after the house. Lolina stood with the mysterious man who had saved Karen from the bandits. The girl asked him with interest that he was completely sure of his decision. Lolina came closer to him and said what he wanted to do. Reina and others as vessels for heroes. The man interrupted Lolina and loudly answered that they would be quite suitable. He added tiredly that they had to be ready. The man turned around, and it was. He turned around, and the man was Religus, Rain's father. The time of the great disaster had arrived, the rebirth of the demonic dragon. Lena came home in the evening. Marina asked who would sleep next to Rain. Lolina looked at her angrily and said tiredly that it was a good question. It was impossible to sleep next to him. Marina suggested that she and Lolina lie down on either side of Rain and hug him. Marina said that she thought that if they lie down like that, everything would work out. Lolina shouted loudly with a smile that Marina had suggested a very good idea. The girl answered that she really hoped that they would be able to get a good night's sleep. Rain returned to the room and Marina and Lolina were sleeping together. He looked at them tiredly and thought that after all, nothing had worked out. Their plan had completely failed. A new day came and Lolina fed Karen. The girl shouted that she was grateful for the food. Karen went to the bedroom to rest after eating. Karen lay down on her bed and said that she had eaten too much, but she felt so good lying on her bed now. Lolina looked at her and angrily replied that this was not the way to behave. Lolina said tiredly that if Karen were to lie around like that after eating, she would become a cow. The girl mockingly told Lolina that this was her personal experience. Rain and Marina, as well as Karen, were in the academy hall. Eiyuu read his speech loudly so that everyone could hear it. Many people were looking at him. Eiyuu said that even if their goal was far away, they would spend their spring of youth usefully, filling it with meaning. This day was the beginning of a new life. They should spend it with friends. The guy continued to say loudly that they should not be embarrassed by anything, namely the name of the third Archduke of Griffinbell. All the students loudly said that they thanked him for his guidance. Rain started snoring loudly. Eiyuu started to walk down the steps but stopped near the heroes. He looked at Rain in shock. Eiyuu said that Rain Curtis was just awful. Eiyuu looked again at Rain, who was not only sleeping but also drooling in his sleep. Marina was braiding Karen's hair, who had also fallen asleep from Eiyuu's speech. The guy angrily shouted that his speech was really that boring. Rain heard his voice and gradually began to wake up. At this time, Marina was trying to wake up Karen. Rain awkwardly scratched his head and answered Eiyuu that Karen had actually dragged him here, but his speech was too long, and they couldn't stay awake. Eiyuu angrily said that the hero's family should be brought up better. Since they don't know the value of speech, then at least let them behave appropriately. Rain awkwardly laughed. Some guy said loudly that Eiyuu was right. He came closer to Rain and his friends and said that they didn't look like the hero's children at all, and that was very suspicious. He started to come even closer. The guy angrily said that, if you think about it, magic looked no less suspicious anyway. Maybe they were hiding something. Rain felt hurt by the words that he was bad at magic, reincarnated, abandoned, he hated shiitake, was with Marina every day, ate Karen's purin. The guy asked Eiyuu why he didn't think so. Eiyuu got nervous and started shouting that no, he didn't have any secrets. Religus entered the room and put his hand on the guy's shoulder. He told him to stop bothering them. They had their own secrets, like wanting to go to a monastery. Eiyuu stood up abruptly and thought in surprise that this was really happening. Rain looked at Religus in shock and asked him in surprise what he was doing here. The man asked if it wasn't obvious why he was here now. Karen jumped and hugged him tightly. She screamed loudly that the old man had come to meet Karen. Religus moaned in pain as Karen hugged him. He said tiredly that she was as energetic and cheerful as always. Rain looked at this picture in surprise and asked his father why she called him an old man. Religus awkwardly answered that he had returned to the city, he had met her by chance and helped her, and that was how he had become an old man. Rain decided not to focus on Karen and asked him why he had come to the academy. Religus looked at the crowd of students who were whispering and watching them attentively. The man exhaled and said that since they had attracted attention to themselves, he would like to say something. The man turned to the students and said loudly that his name was Religus Curtis. From this day forward, I am the acting director of the academy. He thinks that everyone already knows that his son got in this year. Karen climbed on his neck and constantly tried to pull out a clump of hair that was sticking out of his hairdo. Religus ignored her and let her do what she wanted. Religus continued to say that, however, his son was a student like all the others. He had no intention of giving him any leeway. Religus looked at everyone carefully. He said that only the most talented were gathered in this academy. He is sure that everyone's talent will turn into a force capable of saving their world. He was silent for a few minutes. Suddenly, he shouted loudly that they should become heroes together. Karen joyfully raised her hands and began waving them. Religus's speech amazed everyone, and now every student began to applaud him. All the students suddenly stood up from their seats and shouted loudly along with Religus. The man also supported them with his shout, so that they would see that he was with them. Religus stepped aside a bit and approached his son. He hit him lightly on the head and said that it was not right to fall asleep in the middle of a speech. Karen began to climb down his cloak. Rain said that he apologized for that. Religus approached the boy who had bullied Rain. He sternly told him and Eiyuu that if they wanted to compete, they should do so through their studies. The man added that within the academy, it didn't matter where he came from. They had to get along with everyone. The boy said fearfully that he was asking for forgiveness. Miyu said angrily that he had dragged him into this too. Karen stood next to Religus and began waving her arms. She shouted with a smile that it was good. The man said with affection that she was very sweet and lovely. Religus smiled and said that the ceremony was now closed. Classes would begin tomorrow. Everyone could go back to their dorm rooms and start getting to know their friends. Rain, Marina, and Karen reached a tall building. Rain said in surprise that this was their dorm. Karen happily shouted that it was huge. The heroes approached the doors and began to examine it more closely. Marina said that this is special treatment for you. Rain looked around and asked with interest where Miyu was now. Marina replied that Miyu had run off to the dorm in a hurry. Karen was not paying attention to their conversation. She was interested in the huge building. She really wanted to go inside. Marina handed Rain the scroll and said that Miyu was in front of here, this. The guy unrolled the scroll, and it said that whoever entered without knocking would be killed. Rain continued to read that whoever touched his thing would be killed. If they touched him, they would also be killed. Do not use the toilet or bathroom, otherwise he would kill them. If they broke even one of the rules, he would kill them. Rain was surprised to think that this was a real death threat. Marina said that she thought Karen wouldn't last a day. Rain looked at her in shock and said that they should discuss this inside. They opened the door and saw May. The girl happily said, "Welcome home." She came closer to them and said with a smile that she was appointed as the head of the dorm. Karen happily shouted that this is how it is. May shook and stuttered that she was so glad that she could look after Rain again. May burst into tears. She rushed to hug Rain. May screamed loudly that she was so happy. Rain awkwardly replied that he relied on her. Marina and Karen looked at the couple in surprise. May broke away from Rain and said that the girls' dorm was to the right up the stairs, and the boys' dorm was to the left. Their things were already sorted into closets. The heroes climbed the stairs. When it was time to part ways, Rain waved goodbye to Marina and Karen and said that they would see each other soon. Rain reached the room that had a sign on it that said it was Rain and Miyu's room. The guy said in surprise that this was a common room. He looked at the door and said that of course he wouldn't come in without knocking. It looked like he wouldn't last the day, not Karen. Rain opened the door and decided to call Mia. The guy said that he wanted to talk about the rules. When Rain looked up, he saw a girl changing her clothes. Rain blushed and closed the door. He shouted loudly that he was sorry. He was in the wrong room. The guy stood there for a few seconds, then asked in surprise what had just happened. Rain went to the nameplate and double-checked it. He said uncertainly that everything seemed to be correct, especially since it was a male dorm. Rain opened the door a little and said that he was coming in. He looked around the room, but there was no one there. The guy said in shock that there was no one here. Rain undressed and put his things on his bed. He said that maybe he was just tired. The guy went to the closet and said that it just couldn't have been a dream. He opened the closet door and saw Mia. Rain stared at him in shock and wondered why there were not only clothes but also Mia in his closet. How was he supposed to understand this? What was going on? Rain heard someone knock on the door. The guy behind the door said that he was there to see Mr. Miyu. His name was Maggot. He wanted to apologize for what happened at the ceremony. Rain told him to come in. The door was open. If you're here to see Miyu, then... Miyu grabbed Rain and pulled the closet so Maggot wouldn't find anyone in the room and just leave. Maggot entered the room and immediately began to say that he was asking Mr. Mia to ask him. The guy began to look around but did not see anyone. He asked in surprise why there was no one there. Maggot said that it was very strange there was no one in the room. Rain blushed and asked Miyu what he was doing. The boy tried to break free from his hands. Miyu told him to stop making noise and be quiet. Rain looked at Miyu's figure, which was female. Miyu grabbed Rain's head and told him not to look. There were reasons for that. Miyu said that the boys at the Imperial Palace have a duty of inheritance to the Empire. Every family tries to keep their title, since it is impossible to get it back. Miyu continued speaking, but with sadness in her voice, that her mother died early, so she was the only one in the family. After her mother died, her father was afraid of losing his title, so he raised her like a son. Miyu said that such a lie would quickly be revealed when she graduated, got married and had a child, and then they could probably just get rid of her. Rain said angrily that it was wrong to do that to one's own child. The guy angrily asked her that she wasn't just a tool in his hands. Miyu looked at Rain in shock and sadly said that she had no choice. Because she was a girl, Miyu blushed at her words and didn't know what to do now. Rain hit his head on the closet door. Maggot stared in surprise. He definitely heard the noise coming from the closet. He decided to think for a while. Miyu grabbed Rain by the shoulders and said that he should not make any noise if they were discovered. It was the end. Rain blushed and thought that this situation was no better. Miyu hit Rain's leg and wanted to scream, but he covered her mouth. He whispered that she herself said that they shouldn't make noise, otherwise they would be exposed, and no one needed that. Miyu exhaled loudly, but quickly covered her mouth with her hand. Mogat was about to leave the room, but he suddenly turned his head towards the closet. It seemed to him that it screamed. Miyu thought in a panic that she hoped that no one would hear. Maggot scratched his head and said discontentedly that, okay, he would come back later. He walked out of the room and slammed the door loudly. Miyu and Rain happily walked out of the closet and exhaled loudly. They sat down on the floor. Miyu screamed loudly for him to listen to her carefully. No matter what happened, he must not tell anyone about it. Rain turned his head away and said that he understood everything, and now she should get dressed. Suddenly Marina came into the room, dropping the basket of fruit. Rain shouted loudly that everything she saw had a reason. Miyu screamed loudly that it was not what she thought. They would explain everything to her now, no need to worry. Marina said angrily that Rain brought a strange girl to his room on the very first day. Marina was ready to call on her power to teach them a lesson. Evening came and May invited all the guys to dinner. Karen, Miyu, and Marina came out to her. The girl asked in surprise where Rain was now. Marina answered that he decided to take a bath. In reality, Marina froze Rain and put him on the roof of the dorm. This is how our hero's life at the academy began, which is also full of adventures. A new day has come. A whole month has passed since they arrived. Gradually, they got used to their new life. The Magic Academy is the most high-class institution in the kingdom. Most of the lessons are about magic. That's why Rain's grades are even worse than Karen's. The boy looked sadly at his sheet, where all the assignments were crossed out in red. Karen was dancing nearby because she got a good grade. Miyu sat down next to Rain and looked at his paper with a bad grade. She read it all carefully. She told him why he couldn't cope with the simplest tasks. Marina asked him what he didn't understand. She would try to explain. Rain laughed awkwardly. Miyu and Marina started arguing over who would be the first to help Rain with his assignments. Lolina entered the classroom and said that they were getting along well with each other. The girl asked if they could spare her a minute. They went out into the corridor. Rain asked Lolina with interest what had happened, that she had come. The girl answered that the purchasing department had just contacted them. They had planned to give the slave to the scholarship recipient during the ceremony, but they had gotten a bit confused about the timing. Lolina continued to say that they could go and get him now. Rain asked in surprise that they would give him another slave, but he already had Karen and didn't need more. Lolina pointed at Karen and said that then they could just swap her for someone else. The girl asked Rain if he was okay with her idea of swapping Karen. Erin pulled out her report card and happily said that she was talking nonsense. Karen even had better grades than Rain. The guy looked at her angrily because he was upset about his grades. Rain turned to Lolina and replied that, however, he agreed with her proposal. Lolina happily replied that he had helped her out. Karen asked that he was not serious now. Rain looked at her and loudly replied that no, of course he wouldn't trade her for someone else. Karen screamed that he was lying. It was written all over his face. They went into the store. There was a girl with ears. She greeted them happily. The girl asked what they wanted to buy. They had everything they needed. Rain replied that Lolina had asked him to come in. The guy thought for a moment and added that she had told him to look at the slave. The girl jumped up and down happily. She shouted that they were the scholarship holders. They should have told her about it right away. The girl came to the room and said that all the slaves here were for sale. She added that touching and hurting was prohibited. Now they could come in and choose a slave. Rain and his friends entered the rooms and were looked at by dozens of slaves. The girl sat down on the bench and said with a smile that she would be here. If they needed anything, they should call her. Karen tugged at his jacket sleeve to get his attention. Rain turned to her, and Karen walked up to the big man. Karen said that he was not bad. The man greeted Rain. The guy stared at Karen and the man in shock. Rain angrily asked Karen why he needed such a slave. The girl irritably replied that then let this slave be hers. The guy came closer to her and confidently told her to put him back in his place. Karen resisted and wanted him to choose this slave. Marina called Rain and said that there was one boy here. Rain tiredly said that he had enough slaves. Rain turned his head and saw a huge dog next to Marina. The girl took out a piece of paper and said that she had already signed the agreement, and the dog's name was Dantaro. Rain wondered if it wasn't just a pet. The guy came closer and said discontentedly that Marina had already given him a name. Karen happily said that the dog was very big. Maria told Rain that she had also given Mia a name when she made the agreement. Rain looked at Mia in surprise and asked if she had also already chosen a slave. Miyu replied that she didn't know how to say it correctly. Rather, she was forced. Miyu moved some of the clothes away from the girl she had chosen as her slave. There was a mark on the girl's body. Miyu said that this brand was their trademark. She looked at the saleswoman and asked if that was why they had to move the deadline. The girl looked away and awkwardly replied that she had no idea what she was talking about. She thought in horror that it was dangerous. If he found out about everything, it would be worse. The girl opened her lunch and began to eat. A dog came up to her, and it tried to drive it away. The girl thought that in fact, the true purpose of their arrival was to test their observation skills. She continued to reason that among all of them, there is only one special one. Marina put her hand on the shoulder of one of the slave girls. She said that Rain should choose her. The guy asked with interest why her. Did she really have incredible strength? Marina handed the girl to herself and told Rain that it was very nice to hug her. Rain answered tiredly that now everything was clear to him. He approached the slave and asked for forgiveness for Marina. Rain asked the girl her name. The girl shook with fear. She awkwardly replied that she didn't have a name. Usually they called her you or hey. Rain saw the scars on her arms. The boy squatted down in front of her and smiled broadly. Rain asked her how she became a slave. The girl answered that she was abandoned as a child. The mother who picked her up worked for a construction company. She had no opportunity to do hard work. The girl continued to say that she also did not know the magic suitable for this work. She bought another slave cheaply, eventually selling her as unnecessary. The girl squeezed her hand tightly and quietly said that she was still an orphan. Rain asked with interest what Shiro meant. Her hair is indeed white, but why did she say that? Miyu said that she is from a lower race. They say that such people are extremely weak and have no abilities, and white hair and skin are distinctive marks. She sighed sadly. Rain smiled and said that it was just because of that. The girl looked at his happy face in shock. Rain exhaled and said that, to tell the truth, he had been abandoned too. The guy added that one rainy day, his father picked him up in the mountains. The fact that he became a scholarship recipient is due to the fact that he was raised by him, and he does not stand out at all because of his background. Rain asked if it was possible to say that about her, speaking about the lower races. He was thinking about something else. He took the girl by the hand and asked if it was possible to get such injuries without trying. The girl sadly replied that she was asking for forgiveness. The scars were just repulsive. Rain said that she thought so, but he really liked it, because these were her hands. The girl blushed and awkwardly said that she was very grateful to him for these words. Miyu asked Rain that he wasn't going to take her. That would be very stupid. Miyu said that not only were there rumors going around about him being abandoned, Rain replied that it wasn't a rumor at all. His name was Rain because his father had picked him up on a rainy day. Rain added that it wasn't that they were trying to hide it, they just didn't talk about it often. The guy turned his head towards the slave and awkwardly said that before the agreement, he still had enough slaves. Maria said so that he would look at her. She stroked the girl and said that she had very smooth skin. Rain would not regret if he took her to himself. Everything would be fine. Rain closed his eyes and screamed for Marina to stop touching her. He accidentally stepped on the vendor's mayonnaise. The girl screamed angrily that he had ruined her product. Mayonnaise got on the slave. The dog noticed it and ran up to lick it. Rain screamed at Dantaro to stop. He can't lick her, it's not good. Rain wanted to help her, but accidentally slipped and fell on the girl. He immediately got up, but the merchant noticed it. She said with a smile that after this, he simply had to sign the agreement. Rain asked in surprise, what? But he didn't. Marina and Miyu said that he should buy it. Karen happily said that that's why he got 1 point. Rain wanted to scream, but then he let out a tired breath. He said that it was fine, he would sign everything. The saleswoman joyfully shouted for them to come to her store again. Lolina and the merchant were sitting in the tavern. The girl said that she apologized for the inconvenience. The merchant replied that in the end, he chose Shiro, as planned. She asked Lolina with interest what the rush was about. The girl replied that he needed not only a Shiro, but someone he could teach. Teaching is knowledge, her father said. Lolina added with a smile that it was true that he should learn something himself now. The merchant asked with interest how she managed to learn magic. Lolina answered that she had no idea. As far back as she could remember, she had always been able to use it. The saleswoman looked at her in surprise and said that she was not very suitable for the role of a teacher. Lolina asked why she decided that. And that was how this difficult but eventful day ended. They found 3 new friends at once to cope with difficulties together. Lolina entered the classroom. She loudly said that the lesson was starting. Marina called the new slave Milili. The girl stroked her and said with admiration that Milili's ears healed her. Marina asked Milili with interest if she liked her name. The girl answered that yes, it was very cute, but could Maria stop touching her ears? Miyu leaned tiredly against her slave and asked why the beast slaves were so beautiful. Rain replied that she also chose a cute name for her slave. Lin is very good. Marina asked Rain if he also wanted to touch Milili's ears. The boy blushed at her words. Milili awkwardly replied that Mr. Rain was not allowed to do that. Rain wondered what he meant by he couldn't. Milili said that, to tell the truth, she knew a few self-defense techniques, and if a man touched her, she could unconsciously cause pain. Karen stamped her foot and shouted loudly for everyone to be quiet. Because of them, the lesson couldn't start. Lolina said that it was well said. Karen was great. Karen smiled proudly. Rain asked Lolina in surprise what she had done to Karen. Had she really bewitched her? The girl told Rain that they had simply promised each other something. Rain looked at Karen and asked what Lolina was talking about now. The girl happily replied that if she behaved quietly during the lesson, Lolina would give her money. Rain said that Lolina had simply bribed her. Karen patted Dontero and told him that he should also be quiet. Lolina smiled and told Rain that this was the wisdom of the heroes themselves. Lolina returned to her place and said that they could now begin the lesson. They would now practice providing magical assistance. She asked that everyone had magical stones with them. Lolina lifted the stone with her magic and said that this is how they could control, with the help of magical power. The ability to control magical power would be the basis for learning how to provide magical assistance. Rain took the stone in his hands and asked that this stone parasitizes animals and turns them into monsters. Will everything be okay? Miyu asked that aren't these just fairy tales? Miyu clutched the stone in her hands and said that the official name of this stone is the Demon Core. Every living being with magical power has a core. Miyu continued to say that this core is what replenishes their powers. If the magic power is completely depleted, the core will begin to crystallize. Miyu said that this effect is irreversible. Eventually, the crystallization takes over the entire organism, and it is forgotten. All that interests it is the search for a source of even greater magical power. Miyu said that this is what monsters are. Rain asked that then a person could become a monster. Lolina told Rain that he was a good man for paying attention to this. Lolina asked that if they had ever had an experience of magical power, what do they do at that moment? Rain answered that they did. Lolina smiled and said that this is what magical help is needed for. Lolina put her hand on Karen's head and said that it was a kind of exercise. Usually it was enough to touch, but in a critical situation, absorption through the mucous membrane was much more effective. Lolina continued to say that, however, everyone's supply of magical power is different, and an excess can damage the core. In the worst case, destroy it. Lolina lifted Karen into the air with her power and said that to avoid this, they would practice. They would be able to do the same as her. It all depends on their skills and imagination. Lolina asked that everyone was ready. She said that first we should try to concentrate some magic. Rain hit Lolina with his power. He screamed that he was sorry for that. Lolina screamed that she had said that it was necessary to do it little by little. He should learn from Marina how to control his power. Marina controlled several stones at once. Rain looked at her in surprise and thought that it was very cool. He approached her and asked how he could control the power of magic. Marina answered that he should try it the way she taught him before. Perhaps it would be easier with Malili. The girl screamed in shock that she would do it too. Maggot told him not to even try, the Shiro were not capable of it. They really don't know anything about magic. All the aristocrats of this city attend magic courses, where they are taught exactly the same. He went on to say that even just moving a rock could take more than a week. Lord Miyu managed it in just 2 days. Perrin added that he didn't know exactly what was wrong with Miyu, but if they tried to teach Shiro, it would be useless. Maggot looked at Marina and Rain, who were trying to teach Malili. Maggot angrily shouted that they weren't even listening to him. The guy started to leave, but before that, he shouted that her hands were all scarred. He was sure that it was because of unsuccessful attempts at magic, but this time they could get it. Malili turned her head towards Rain and said that it was still not worth it. The guy took her hand and confidently said that everything was fine. He would help her cope with everything. Rain told her to relax and try to concentrate her magic. Malili started to be able to release some magic power. The guy happily said that she was doing well, and now he would add a little magic. Malili screamed that she felt strange. Rain thought in fear that he could hurt her like this, so calmly, but he had to be even more careful. Malili shouted joyfully that she had succeeded. Malili's stone rose into the air. Marina sat down in front of her and said that now she saw that she was doing well. Rain said with a smile that thanks to her, he understood the principle. Maggot said with an evil smile that it was not so. He threw his stone at Malili. He feigned a cry that the Shiro stone was behaving strangely now. Malili's stone bounced off and flew towards Miyu. Rain yelled at her to dodge. Miyu turned her head in surprise and said what was happening. She closed her eyes, but nothing happened. Lin caught the rock with her hand, but it hurt her badly. Lolina quickly ran up to them and asked the slave if she was okay. The girl replied that she was. Lin said that everything was fine with the gentleman. Lolina angrily shouted that she was asking her. Let him show her his hands right now. The girl extended her hand. Lolina said that she had acted too rashly, but she would help now. Maggot said angrily that because of the Shiro, 2 stones were pushed together, and that was too dangerous. Rain said angrily, that's it. They, the aristocrats, are ready to do anything to keep their faces in the dirt. Maggot asked what he meant. He warned them. Maggot added that it was all because of the Shiro. He said it was useless to teach them. Rain said he thought someone who clung to life with all their might had a better chance than a proud aristocrat who used dirty tricks. Maggot proudly said that since Rain was so zealous in his assertion, he needed to prove it somehow. The guy turned to Lolina and asked that their class also took part in the festivals. The girl answered that it had not yet been decided how exactly, but duels between participants were prohibited. Maggot smiled and said that in that case he proposed the following. They would arrange a duel between Shiro and Lin. Maggot said that they would split into 2 teams and train slaves until the festival. It would be a competition to see who could train a slave better, they, the aristocrats, or the commoners. Rain angrily asked why they would do that. Maggot replied that he himself had said that his Shiro was stronger than him, an aristocrat. He was sure that as their representative, Lord Miyu would never let such words go in one ear and out the other. Miyu said in surprise that, yes, exactly. Maggot said that there was something else. The losing side carries out any orders. The guy asked Miyu that he agreed. She asked if she could ask for anything. Miyu thought that Lin definitely couldn't lose to Malili. If they won, then Rain would do whatever she asked. Rain asked Marina what Miyu was thinking about. The girl replied that she seemed to be untangling the tangle of contradictions between her mind and her desires. Rain awkwardly asked Miyu that they had no reason to quarrel, they could just have fun at the festivals. Miyu said loudly that it was decided. He would think about how Rain could entertain him. Let him prepare for punishment. Lolina looked at Rain and said that he already considered himself a winner. Rain confidently said that he would try to prevent this. The bell rang and Karen smiled happily. Lolina told the students that this lesson was over. Let them practice with the magic stones. Karen approached Lolina and asked with a smile why she had behaved so quietly. Lolina said that for sure she had completely forgotten about it. The girl stroked Karen and the dog on the head. Lolina said with a smile that they were great. Both behaved quietly, and now As she promised, there would be a reward. She gave the dog a piece of beef and Karen money. Karen grabbed Lolina's clothes and pulled them down. The girl grabbed the things and thought that she was being bullied. Lolina asked angrily what she was doing. Karen continued to pull the clothes. She screamed loudly that she gave Dontaro a piece of meat, and she was given a pittance. Lolina said that it was fine, but let her go. Karen continued to pull. She did not listen to Lolina's requests. She screamed that she would not let her go until she gave her a piece of meat. She would pull all the time until she received a reward. Lolina shouted loudly at Rain to do something about Karen. The guy awkwardly said that there was plenty of meat in the dorm. They would go back and Karen would be able to eat. Lily screamed that Karen could buy meat with the money she received. Karen happily asked if it was true she could buy meat with that money or eat at home. Rain flinched at Karen's sudden movement and accidentally placed his hand on Malili's shoulder. The girl's reflex kicked in and she pushed Rain to the ground and then began to strangle him. Karen said that Malili was very strong. Marina said that if Lin were a man, Malili would easily win the fight. Rain described this moment like this: just a little more, and he would be reborn in another world. Karen and Malili were getting ready to go outside. They were putting on their sports clothes. Karen sat on a chair and started tying her shoelaces so that they wouldn't come undone while running. A week passed. In preparation for the festival, Malili was putting all her efforts into training. Lolina was standing near the gates of the academy and noticed Malili running. Lolina was very surprised. Malili really tried her best. She really wanted to beat Lin, who was much more skilled in combat, but Malili seemed more confident. Malili ran to Rain and Marin. She was breathing heavily. The guy said with a smile that she was a great girl. Thanks to the physical exercise, she became much more resilient. Malili started shaking her head and confidently said that it was not so. She still wasn't used to running in shoes. The main character, named Rain, looked at Karen and said that unlike her, she was doing well. Karen was being dragged by a dog, as she could no longer run. The girl wearily spoke up, asking why this had happened. The main character, named Rain, replied that he would also like to know. Karen sat down on the ground and replied that she simply could not lose to Malili. There must be a reason. The girl thought for a moment and joyfully shouted that it was definitely her clothes. Karen pulled her t-shirt a little. The main character, named Rain, told Karen that even if that were the case, they would have to get pretty dirty during today's training. Malili asked with interest what kind of training it would be. The main character, named Rain, said that they were starting today they would have it. The guy took off the fabric, under which there was a sandbox. Karen shouted happily that it was very cool. Malili was also very happy. Karen shouted at Dontaro to run forward. Malili asked what they should do. The main character, Rain, answered that he was talking about training earth magic. Malili excitedly said that she remembered some spells, but she was not very good at them. Karen and Dontaro were already playing in the sandbox at that time. The main character, Rain, said that he thought she understood everything. Earth magic is mainly used for creation. If she tried to frolic in the sandbox like Karen, maybe she could discover something new. Karen shouted to Malili to come over and help them. There was a bucket of water in the sandbox nearby to make it easier to sculpt. Karen and Malili sculpted a beautiful girl. Karen decided that it was her after 10 years. The girl spoke admiringly so that Malili could see how beautiful their sand figure turned out. Malili answered that it did. She raised her head and said admiringly that by simply adding water to the sand, it became so hard. The main character, named Rain and Marina, also sculpted from sand. The guy told Malili with a smile that it was the same in magic. Malili asked if this was true. The protagonist, Rain, replied that when using fire magic, he only creates a small spark, and to increase the flame, he simply pours in his magical power. The main character, Rain, asked Malili what element goes well with earth. The girl replied that if you add water to earth first and then strengthen it with magic. Malili realized what she had to do and shouted that she would try it now. Malili squatted down and placed her hands on the sand. She concentrated and spoke so that the hollow mud would hear her voice and take the form of a mud golem. A small monster emerged from the sand. Millie couldn't stop admiring the golem she had created. She never thought she could do something like this, but thanks to Rain, she could do it. Marina approached the little golem and said that he was very cute. Karen took his hand and said with a smile that he looked weak. A dog came up and hit the monster on the head. The main character named Rain said that it was enough if you pour more magic into him, he will become stronger. Millie sadly said that she was asking for forgiveness, that was all she could do. Marina handed her things. She told her to use these, the dragon golem gloves and the rubber-soled tabby. The protagonist named Rain asked Marina if they had been returned to her. She replied that yes, because of Karen's childishness, they had almost been confiscated. With Karen's jokes, Lolina almost got hurt. Karen tied a spike to her chair. The main character named Rain said in shock that it was horrible. Millie said that she couldn't accept such expensive items. She and Marina went to the bench. Millie sat on it, and Marina started putting on her gloves and tabi. She said that thanks to them, Millie would be able to hide the wounds that bothered her so much, and they also had an earthstone built into them, so they were perfect for her. The main character, named Rain, asked Millie that they would have a training fight against Karen. Karen heard this and laughed loudly. She screamed that Millie had surpassed her in running, but she would not give in to battle. Karen grabbed the necklace and screamed that if she rubbed the necklace she got from her grandfather, it would turn into a weapon. A huge hammer appeared in Karen's hands. Karen started to attack Millie. The main character named Rain shouted for her to defend herself. First, let her use earth magic. Millie crouched and placed her hand on the ground. Karen raised her hammer and shouted that she would end with one gift. She hit Millie, but she was protected by the sand, which Karen hit. Millie looked at Karen carefully. The protagonist named Rain shouted for her to summon a golem. Millie confidently answered that yes. Let the mighty earth become her protection. She summons a golem with the help of the earth. Talos Golem appeared behind Millie. Karen ran at Millie again and screamed that the ground was just the ground. Millie clenched her fist and prepared to defend herself from Karen's attacks. Karen shouted loudly for her to receive. Millie loudly told the golem to attack. Talos and Karen hit each other, and there was a loud explosion. Lolina, who was still standing near the academy, screamed in surprise at the explosion. The protagonist named Rain stopped Karen, and Marina stopped the golem. The protagonist named Rain said that it was enough. Karen angrily asked the guy why he stopped her. The main character named Rain answered that it was a training fight. They didn't need injuries. They have already made very good progress in this direction, so they will continue to carry out their plan. Millie said that she is not very confident in herself. The protagonist, named Rain, said that if that was the case, then she could fight him. The protagonist, named Rain, smiled widely and clenched his fist. Millie, with tears in her eyes, screamed that it was impossible she would die. The main character, Rain, looked at the dog and said that they had no other opponents, unless... Millie understood what he was getting at and confidently said no. A guy who was all in bandages came up to them and asked if he would be suitable for the battle. The main character named Rain was surprised to think who it was, some very suspicious guy. Millie looked at Rain in shock. The boy smiled widely and said that he was the teacher of the third Archduke Gryffindor and also the one who raised Lynn. Millie and the main character named Rain sighed in surprise at this information. The guy picked up a mop and said that, like him, Lynn was skilled in handling a spear. He believed that such a sparring match would be very useful for them. The guy looked towards Rain and added that they could feel free. He, in general, wouldn't mind keeping her owner company. Marina approached Rain with a sword. The main character named Rain put his hand in front of her and took the sword. The guy said that he knows Rain's capabilities. He cannot hold back in battle. The main character named Rain confidently said that in that case, with his permission, he would fight at full strength. The main character named Rain quickly began to attack, but the guy skillfully dodged. The main character named Rain tried to attack again, but this time the guy dodged Rain's blow, which he put all his strength into. The boy took the sword with a smile and shouted that it was his turn. It was Rain's turn to dodge, which he did successfully. The guy thought that he expected this from the hero's vessel. It wouldn't hit the Rhine like that. He continued to reason that the distance needed to be increased. Lolina came and stopped the fight. She grabbed the mop that the teacher was using to fight Rain. She looked at him angrily. Lolina hit him in the face with all her might. She screamed angrily that he had told her at the front door she had been waiting for him for a very long time. The guy wheezed that he had woken up too late. Lolina asked Rain and Marina what had disturbed them. The guy asked with interest who he was. The teacher stood up and answered with a smile that his name was Necro. He was Lolina's future husband. Lolina started to beat him and scream that even though he was a hero, she would never agree to that. Necro said that he loved her. The main character named Rain and Marina looked at them in surprise. The main character named Rain asked in shock that he was actually a hero. Necro and Lolina came to Religus's office. The guy sat down on a chair, and a skeleton appeared next to him. Lolina stood near Religus's desk. Religus told Necro that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. The strongest necromancer, and one of the 7 heroes, the immortal king, Necrocloud. The guy looked at Religus carefully. He said he was glad he was in good health. Necro asked that he understood why he had to come to the academy. Religus said he came here because of the festival. Necro said that his behavior was somewhat different from what was planned. Lin was to become the hero's handmaiden. Religus took out a scroll and spread it on the table. It said that the Emperor had ordered the festival location to be changed to Ryugijo National Plaza. The 3rd Archduke is ordered to personally invite all the Academy graduates and expel all those not involved. Religus told Necro that, by personal order of the Emperor, the location of the festival has been changed. It will be held at the Ryugijo National Square. Necro said that everything is clear. He added that it means that they just laughed at him. Necro angrily clutched the scroll. Religus said that he had already realized that on the same day that the Devil Dragon appeared, the 7 heroes would gather in the same place. The slave trader was preparing her papers. She was preparing for an important job. She couldn't let anyone down. After all, she was being appointed to a very important role. The day of the festival arrived. Everyone gathered in the arena to see the show. The host shouted loudly that the main event of the Rabolt Magic Academy was about to begin. He paused and shouted loudly again that it was time for the slave battle. The host was a trader from a slave shop. Karen and a dog were sitting with her. She said loudly that today they would be broadcasting as a threesome. She, Arashi, Karen, and Dontaro would be covering all the events for the viewers. So it was time for the scholarship students to bring out their slaves. Milili, the main character named Rain, Marina, Lolina entered the arena, and on the opposite side stood Miyu, Lin, and Necro. Arashi said that the Shiro with great potential was chosen by the heroes themselves, and her name was Milili. She continued to say that the strongest slave in history was raised by the Griffinbell family, Lin. Arashi shouted loudly that the battle was between the aristocracy and the commoners, with the honor of the families at stake. She asked the audience who would win today. Karen and Dontaro were more interested in the food than the show. The main character named Rain said that they were actually aristocrats too. The main character named Rain asked Marina why things turned out like this. The girl turned towards Miyu and said that it was because Miyu had lost to her desires. Miyu angrily screamed that it was not Marina who should talk about this now. Necro came up to them and said that they should calm down. They should show respect and not quarrel. The slaves are fighting, not them. Marina and Miyu butted heads and were about to start fighting. Necro put his hand on Miyu's shoulder and said that moreover the Griffinbell family had nothing to do with this. He went on to say that there was probably someone speculating behind the scenes, but they wouldn't let things go as planned. Heroes came to watch this battle. It was the magnificent Duke Tia Gurm, Gurm's eldest daughter Lopet Gurm, the maid Tirth, and the great Duke Jade Generos. Tia looked at Rain and said that this was the heir of Religus. He looked weak. Religus came up to them and angrily asked Tia what their family had planned this time. Lopet angrily shouted at him that he didn't dare talk to her father in such a tone. The girl angrily added that it would be fine if he were addressing Jade, whose intentions are always impure and insidious, but he was saying this to her father, who would never hide anything. Tirth told Lopet uncertainly that she thought differently. In fact, Jade always exudes a solid lie. Jade sadly asked what he did to them, that they treat him like that. Jade stood up from his seat and said that it was because he was using the power of lies. He asked that the decree was signed for the sake of the tournament being held safely, wasn't it? Jade raised his hand and shouted for the barrier of contradictions to open. The entire field was lit up with a bright light. Religus said that this barrier was also used in the decisive battle against the dragon. Jade smiled broadly and said that this way none of the spectators would be harmed. They were protected even from outside attacks. Arashi shouted loudly that all the preparations were complete. Jade sat down in his chair and happily said that they could now enjoy the show. Religus thought excitedly that maybe he was nervous for nothing. It would be good if nothing happened. Arashi shouted loudly that she was declaring the slave battle open. Malili jumped away from Lin so she couldn't hit her. Lin looked at her carefully and said that she didn't need to worry. She wasn't going to drag out the fight. Lin took out her spear and assumed a fighting stance. She told Mealy that she would finish her with one blow. The girl started running towards Mealy to attack. Arashi said loudly that Lin was going to finish everything with one blow. Would the whole battle really end with that? Lin was already a few centimeters away from Malili. Lin hit her in the stomach with all her might. Malili was thrown back several meters. Arashi screamed in shock that Lin had made a direct hit. She really had decided to finish it all off with one blow. Suddenly, Lin screamed loudly. She fell to her knees and clutched her chest. She asked in surprise what had just happened. Malili landed safely and looked full of energy. Arashi asked what happened. She did not understand why Lin was kneeling. The girl remembered that Malili counterattacked her during the attack. It was a precise move. Malili read it and struck. Malili poured water on the sand and confidently said that she was a coward. But the main character named Rain changed her. For the sake of the master, she must overcome her and bring victory. Several small golems appeared in front of Malili. Arashi screamed in shock that Malili was claiming victory this time. The cheers of the commoners echoed throughout the arena. At this time, Karen and Dantero were fighting over a piece of meat. They didn't care what was happening in the arena. The main goal for them was to get more food. Lin took a stance and put her hand on her chest. She told Malili that let it be as she wanted. She was changing her priority now. Lin loudly hit the ground with her spear. Lin ran up to the surprised Malili and screamed that she was now her enemy. The girl raised her leg and leaned on the spear to strike Malili, but she managed to dodge. Lin hit the golem that was sitting on Malili's head. It flew off with a loud bang. Malili didn't expect it. She was very surprised by Lin's abrupt action. Malili looked at the golem that had shattered into small pieces. One of her golems had just been insignificant. She hadn't even had time to do anything. Malili thought in horror that she couldn't keep up. Lin was too fast for her eyes. If the golem hadn't protected her just now, she might have already lost. Malili was too distracted by her thoughts to notice that Lin had started attacking again. She grabbed her spear and struck Malili in the chest. The blow was so strong that Malili was thrown several meters above the ground. The golem at her feet was also injured. Lin hit both Malili and him at the same time, which no one expected. She was already confident of her victory over Malili in this duel. Lin hit Malili with her spear several more times, but this time she was able to dodge Lin's onslaught, which became merciless towards her, which made the situation worse. Lin clenched her fingers into a fist and pointed it at Malili. She made a frightening face and confidently told Malili that this was her end in this duel. Lin slammed her fist into Malili's stomach. The blow was so strong that there was a deafening sound from the fist hitting the body. At the same time, Lin slammed her spear into Malili's back. Malili flew into the wall of the arena. All the sand rose into the air and covered the entire battlefield, so that nothing could be seen. The people in the stands screamed in surprise, because they did not expect this. The main character named Rain and Marina were watching the battle in a specially designated place. Marina screamed loudly that Malili was in trouble. She already wanted to go to her and make sure that she was okay. The main character named Rain put his hand on Marina's shoulder, indicating that she should not do anything. He returned his gaze from Marina to the battlefield. He confidently told Marina to calm down right now. Everything was fine. There was nothing to be afraid of. Lin approached the place where Malili had landed. Part of the wall had collapsed from the force of her blow. Malili was probably already unconscious, which meant Lin only had to make sure of it. In the chest of the stones lay Malili's golem, which looked defeated. It did not move or show any signs of life, which convinced Lin of her victory. Suddenly, Lin was grabbed by the leg. It was Malili. Lin looked at the ground and saw a huge hole in the ground. Malili was in it, waiting for Lin to come to her. Milili jumped out and enlarged her fist. She punched Lin with all her strength, but she was able to partially dodge Milili, but she was still very surprised that she could still stand on her feet. Milili had managed to hit Lin after all. She had torn part of her clothes on her chest. Now Lin was a little bit naked. She was very angry with Lin because she had already thought that she had won. Arashi screamed in shock that there was a powerful counterattack from Milili. The battle continues. Lin didn't expect such persistence from Milili, and jerked in surprise. Milili thought angrily, no matter what you do, it's all useless. She's a simple shiro, whom no one believes in. Milili approached Lin. She thought irritatingly that before she would have said that, and then given up, not even fighting and giving herself a chance to win. The girl continued to reason that Mr. Main character named Rain said that he liked these arms that were covered with scars from bullying and training to become stronger. Milili began to quickly strike Lin. She hit with all her strength just to win. She never wanted to win as much as she did today. She had to defeat Lin. The stone on Milili's gloves almost shattered. She thought of Marina, who said that white hair was beautiful. She was the one who insisted that the main character named Rain take her. Milili placed her hand, which was white and gloved, on the ground. She covered it from above. Milili thought that it was because of this, please. She should hold on a little longer. She continued to reason that she still had something to fight for. He said in surprise that he felt an oppressive pressure. Religus heard the crowd scream. People stood up from their seats and started waving their arms to support their favorite. Religus said that the oppressive pressure could have been caused by the raging magical power of the spectators. He looked closely at the field that was shining. Religus said that this feeling could also have been caused by the barrier itself. One of the heroes told Religus that it might be the stone the slave was using. Someone said that it was the Devil Dragon's magic stone. Religus turned his head sharply towards the source of the sound. He hadn't expected to hear such words. Milili grabbed her hand and looked at it in surprise. She felt very strange. The girl thought that she had a very strange feeling the earth was sucking out her strength. There was an explosion that lifted all the sand into the air. Nothing was visible. Everyone screamed in fear. Because it happened very unexpectedly, no one could see anything. The main character named Rain covered his face with his hands, because the power of the explosion was very strong. Marina stood nearby, but she also could not understand what was happening on the battlefield. Lin grabbed her spear tightly to hold on and not fall. She was breathing heavily because she had already spent all her strength in the fight against Milili, and she still needed to withstand the explosion. A monster crawled out of the sand. It looked like a dragon, but it was made entirely of bones, only its wings were made of skin. The monster looked scary and very strong. The main character, named Rain, saw the monster and shouted in shock that it was a dragon skeleton. But why was it here? The guy began to look around the battlefield to see his girlfriend. The main character named Rain shouted loudly for Milili to give a sign that she was okay. The guy saw the outline of a person. The main character named Rain really hoped that it was Milili and that she was okay. Marina came up to him, and Milili was in her arms. The girl immediately after the explosion hurried to find her, and she succeeded. Marina confidently told Rain that Milili was completely okay, and there was no need to worry. Marina put Milili on the ground. The main character named Rain ran up to her and knelt down to check that she was okay and not injured. He was very scared of her. Milili tiredly said that she was asking for forgiveness from Rain. She had messed up and could not cope. The main character named Rain shook his head and excitedly said that there was no need to apologize. The main thing is that she was okay. The main character named Rain turned his head towards Marina and said with a smile that he was grateful to her for her help. Suddenly, his smile disappeared. He saw that Marina was now in danger. Marina was grabbed by dozens of hands that held her and did not allow her to escape. These hands were on the body of the dragon skeleton, which was the battlefield all this time. The main character named Rain shouted to Marina that he was going to help her. He ran quickly to save Marina before something terrible happened. He almost made it, but crashed into an invisible wall. Jade walked up to Rain and laughed loudly. He told Rain that he couldn't get through the barrier. He wouldn't let anyone stop him like they did last time. The main character named Rain looked at Jade in surprise. He did not understand what was happening. He thought angrily that for the last time he was talking about. Also, he had heard the voice of this man somewhere before. The main character named Rain was plunged into memories of his past life. The main character named Rain had already crossed the road, but Marina was not next to him. He looked back in surprise, but Marina was behind him. The main character named Rain asked Marina why she was standing there. They had to go. A truck was approaching Marina, but the girl was in no hurry to cross. The main character named Rain waited for her to start moving. Marina said with tears in her eyes that she did not understand what was happening now. She could not move. The main character named Rain stared at the girl in surprise. He wanted to approach her. The main character named Rain saw something strange behind Marina. It was a shadow that was holding Marina. The main character named Rain extended his hand to her and thought about who was the person behind the girl. It turned out to be Jade, who smiled widely and laughed. Present time in the arena. Jade approached Marina and touched her. He happily said that he got the remains of the dragon. Marina could not move and protect herself. Before that, their everyday life was calm. One day, Malili and Karen were taking a bath together. They were happily swimming and having fun in the water. They really liked spending time together. Marina looked at them and said that they were just like sisters. The girls got out of the bath. Karen hugged Marina by the shoulders and shouted with a smile that if they really were sisters, then Karen should be the older sister. Karen happily added that, after all, Malili was still little. She compared their builds and thought with disappointment that Karen was still smaller. Karen started to cry loudly. She screamed that at this rate, she would never become an older sister. She really wanted to be like Lolina. Malili asked that she definitely wanted to be like Lolina. Malili added that in that case she would do everything. She remembered what Lolina looked like. Malili had magically made Karen have the same high ponytail as Lolina. Malili happily said that everything was ready. Now Karen was the older sister. The girl happily shouted that she was just like Lolina. Marina tiredly asked who was even older here. Jade stroked Marina again. He happily said that he finally got the dragon core. She grew even more than expected. Marina was unconscious at this time. The main character named Rain started to hit the protective barrier. He hit it with all his might, causing cracks to appear. The main character named Rain screamed to take his hands off Marina and free her. The main character named Rain put all his magic into the blow and the protective barrier broke. The guy entered the arena. The main character named Rain grabbed his sword and looked angrily at Jade, who grabbed Marina. Jade said angrily that it seemed like he wouldn't stop until he got rid of him. He started walking towards Rain to start the battle for Marina. He couldn't lose. The main character named Rain screamed angrily at him to take his hands off Marina. The guy jumped and pointed the sword at Jade. He couldn't leave Marina in trouble. The main character named Rain had to protect her. The main character named Rain almost hit Jade's neck, but the sword was intercepted by Tirtha's hand. She was sitting on the guy's shoulder. The girl threw the sword away and said that she apologized to Rain for this. She put her hand on Jade's hat and told Rain that there would be trouble if Jade died. She didn't want that trouble, so she would protect him. The main character named Rain looked at the couple with anger. He couldn't understand why they needed Marina, but he wouldn't give her to anyone. Tirth created a black ball and screamed that it was a gravity path spell. She continued to sit on Jade's shoulder. The man smiled evilly and looked towards Rain. He couldn't wait for the guy to lose. Rain was pinned to the ground. He couldn't move. He said angrily that none of the 7 heroes would do such a thing. Tia and Loput came up to Jade and Tirth. They stood next to their allies. Jade laughingly asked Rain if he still considered them heroes. He added that he was a real simpleton, but that was typical of Religus, and therefore his son. Jade happily said that they are the ones who control this world from behind the scenes. They are the ones who are forbidden to talk about. They are the real demons. Jade, Tirth, Tia, and Loput are demons, but not heroes. The main character, Rain, said in disbelief that this was nonsense. No one had ever managed to survive the transformation. Jade looked sadly at Tia and Loput and said that he wasn't surprised that this is what they were taught at the academy. Jade said that the normal body is unable to withstand it and crystallizes. The person loses consciousness and becomes a real monster. Jade continued to say that people whose transformation has begun are locked in an underground dungeon and simply await their death. But this is not a place to quietly await death. The man went on to explain that after hundreds of years, the Kingdom of Darkness had come to an end. This happened to Jade, but his transformation was successful, and he was able to be reborn. Jade smiled evilly and told Rain that unlike any other race, they had a stronger body, more mana, and lived longer, which is why they should rule the surface. The man said that here they were not expecting the simplest opponents, but heroes. Their mana, of course, is not infinite, but its reserves are huge. These heroes are Lolina, Religus, and Necro. Jade said that at this time, the idea to create a weapon was born. The dragon roared loudly, and the people who tried to escape began to turn into crystals. The protagonist named Rain shouted in shock that, and the secret weapon, it turns people into crystals. At this time, Religus sat down on the ground and could not do anything. He felt very weak. Jade happily said that the dragon continued to endlessly draw mana from those around him. The carrier of the dragon core had to be forcibly converted, and the heroes would continue to lose strength. 2 birds with 1 stone. The man continued to say that, however, she turned out to be a marriage. The king's core was too weak. Marina remained unconscious. The main character named Rain said in horror that the entire royal family. Jade interrupted him and said with a smile that it was destroyed already during the decisive battle with the dragon, but their blood did not disappear completely. Jade added that the princess had an innate gift for magic, and he really wanted to take advantage of it. But I hold my daughter close, she died. Jade himself killed her. Jade said, so as not to make a fool of himself next time, he sewed the princess's core into her daughter. After that, he transferred her to another world. All that was left was to wait for her to grow up. The child turned out to be Marina. Jade said that he thought their plan had completely failed due to Rain's interference, but who would have thought that she was able to move under her own power? The main character, named Rain, said angrily that he had deprived Marina of happiness just for this. The guy was simply furious from what he heard. He was able to overcome the attraction and grab his sword. Tia walked up to Jade and said that he could leave the rest to them. He had to retreat. He looked at Religus and said that soon they wouldn't be able to hold him back. Jade turned around and said that he was leaving then. The main character named Rain jumped and shouted that he would not let him go. Jade smiled evilly and looked at the guy who decided to start a battle with him. Tia stopped Rain's attack with her sword. The man decided to fight Rain himself. He raised his sword high and decided to hit the young man with it. The main character named Rain dodged and thought evilly that Tia had the same moves as his father. The main character named Rain quickly ran up to Eiyuu and started to hit him. He thought angrily that in this case it was the end. Tia put his hand in front of Rain's face and used fire magic. A huge pillar of flame hit Rain, who was not expecting it at all, because he thought they were fighting only with swords. The main character named Rain was all burnt. He fell to the ground and thought angrily that this was just a normal flame. How could a basic spell be so powerful? He miscalculated. Tia looked at him and said that he would not disturb them anymore, and now he needed to sleep. Sleep, son of Religus. The man began to move further and further away from Rain. The main character named Rain tried to grab Tia, but he was already far away. He began to lose consciousness, and his last thought was that he could still save Marina from their hands. The main character named Rain opened his eyes and found himself in his room. He was lying on the bed, all wrapped up in bandages. Karen and Malili were sleeping next to him, watching him the whole time. The main character named Rain looked at them and smiled. They were very cute. He stroked Karen's head, and she began to wake up. She looked at Rain for a few seconds and stood up abruptly. Karen screamed happily that he had finally woken up. Her scream woke up Malili. She looked at Rain in surprise and ran to the exit. The girl shouted that she would call May now. Karen jumped on Rain and hugged him tightly. The guy looked at her in surprise and asked what happened to her. If she squeezed him like that, he could die. Karen cried loudly and hugged Rain even tighter. She screamed loudly that he had been sleeping for 3 whole days. She already thought that he would never wake up again. She didn't want that. She angrily asked who would take care of her then. The main character named Rain said that she could just take care of herself. The guy looked out the window and thought. The main character named Rain couldn't believe that this really happened. The main character named Rain thought that 3 whole days had already passed. It was clear he had lost. The guy clenched his teeth and thought angrily that he was reborn, special, a hero. This was all nonsense. Marina always supported him, and then Karen and Malili appeared and lived with them. The main character, named Rain, grabbed the blanket and continued to reason that he was here by mistake. The door suddenly opened and May ran into the room with Malili. The main character named Rain and Karen looked at her in surprise. May excitedly shouted that Mr. Main Character named Rain had woken up. She hugged him and started crying. May screamed loudly that she was so glad he was okay. The main character named Rain awkwardly replied that he was sorry for making her worry. May let him go and stood next to the bed. The main character named Rain stood up and said that he was told that 3 whole days had passed. The guy asked the girl with interest what was going on with the festival and the city. May replied wearily that the dragon's remains had literally engulfed the entire arena. She had heard that it hadn't ended there. The corrosion had spread all the way to the capital. The damage from that was simply colossal. May continued to tell that at the moment, Mr. Necro has prevented the spread with the help of necromancy, and Lolina is treating and supporting the victims from the nearby lands. The girl also added that, on their father's orders, Miyu and Lin returned to the mansion, and also, regarding Mr. Religus. The main character named Rain interrupted May and stood up abruptly from the bed. He walked up to her and said that he was grateful to her. He wanted to ask his father something in person, but he had to go save Marina. May looked at him in shock. She screamed loudly that he couldn't do it. May walked up to him and put her hands on his shoulders. She said loudly that because of everything that had happened, the city was in complete chaos. She added that there was no telling what might happen if he went outside. The main character named Rain confidently said that he was going there anyway. He was the son of the hero, namely Religus. May looked at him attentively for a few seconds, but then said that it was okay. She would prepare his clothes so that he could go outside and go look for Marina. The main character, named Rain, put on his clothes and went out to May. He looked at them carefully and hesitantly said that these were his father's things. He was wearing armor and a cloak. May smiled widely and told Rain that she had had it tailored to fit him. It might be a little worn, but in a decisive battle, the armor was an indispensable piece of equipment. Karen, Malili, and Dontero's dog walked up to Rain. Karen smiled widely and shouted happily that they were ready. The main character, named Rain, asked them to come to her. Karen asked him with interest what he wanted. Malili was all attention. The main character, named Rain, stroked Karen and Malili on the head. Both girls smiled happily. They really liked Rain's actions. The main character, named Rain, smiled widely and said that he was very grateful to them, but it was too dangerous there, so they needed to stay home. May, Malili, and Karen went outside to see Rain off. Karen waved to Rain and shouted for him to come back quickly. The main character, named Rain, waved back and loudly replied that he would be back soon, but with Marina. The main character, named Rain, walked a few meters. He was noticed by several guys who threw a rock at him and hit him right in the head. The main character, named Rain, screamed in pain. He did not expect the blow. One of the guys angrily asked Rain where he was going to go now. Was the traitor really going to escape? Karen noticed this and ran at the guys who had offended Rain. She angrily screamed that she would give them what for. The main character, named Rain, spoke loudly for her to stop. The girl did not expect that the main character, named Rain, would order her to stay, but she still listened to him. The main character, named Rain, smiled at her to calm her down. Karen looked at him and started crying. Malili looked at her worriedly. The students of the academy started throwing rocks at Rain. They shouted that he was not a hero. It was all a lie. He would be hanging out with a demon again. He had to get out of the city. The main character, named Rain, put a hood on his head to protect his head from blows. May told Malili and Karen that on the day of the decisive battle, she also watched Mr. Religus. Karen and Malili listened to May with tears in their eyes. She continued to say that, accepting the words of encouragement and hope from the villagers. May smiled widely, remembering the time when Religus, Lolina, and Necro were sent to battle. May said that he and his comrades were heading to the battle site. May said sadly that no one could have imagined that the next hero, who inherited the will and aspirations of his father, going into the arms of death itself, would be seen off with cries of betrayal, with stones thrown at him. The main character, named Rain, looked angrily ahead and said that Marina should definitely wait for him. He would definitely save her. The main character named Rain was confident in his victory. He would not allow anything to happen to Marina. The main character named Rain walked along a dark corridor. The guy constantly had to destroy the monsters that live in these walls. He angrily said that there was no end to them, they were constantly coming. The main character, named Rain, evilly destroyed an evil monster that was completely covered in crystals. There were dozens of other monster eyes looking at him, wanting to kill Rain. The main character named Rain looked closely at the monsters that began to surround him. The guy felt a monster attacking from behind. The main character named Rain turned around sharply and shouted that he was calling a magic blade. The main character, Rain, cut the monster in half with a lightning cutter. The boy thought wearily that more mana was being spent than expected. In that case, he might lose in a real battle. The main character named Rain continued to reason that, having foreseen this, Necro gave him this pendant. Before the battle against the demons, the main character named Rain decided to go to Necro to ask him for advice. The main character named Rain approached him. Necro asked in surprise what he was doing there. He was really surprised to see Rain in the city. The guy replied that he was going to save Marina. Necro asked that he wanted to save Marina. The guy told Rain that he was asking for forgiveness, but he couldn't let him do it. The main character named Rain looked at him in surprise. Necro said that there are countless monsters in the underground dungeons. Among them are converted people. Moreover, each of them is strong in their own way, and some are on a completely different level. Necro added that letting someone in there who doesn't have real experience would be a big mistake. Reino said angrily that Marina was waiting to be saved, and he had to do it. Necro said that he speaks directly like Religus. Then he will give it to him. He must use it at a critical moment. The protagonist named Rain asked what he was doing and how he would help him. Necro walked up to Rain and put his hand on his shoulder. He said that it had magic sealed in it. It could teleport up to 7 people at a time, which was very useful. Necro continued to say that if they broke it, they would end up here at the entrance, and he also wanted to give some advice. The boy looked into Rain's eyes so that he would listen carefully. Necro told Rain to think about the fact that he had to come back alive. This is his main goal. The main character named Rain looked at the arena, which was completely covered with sand. He told Necro that everything will be fine, no need to worry. Necro said that this is the answer of a true son of a hero. After that, the main character named Rain went into a dark corridor, which is teeming with monsters. The main character named Rain leaned against the wall and thought that there was nothing good about it. He was wounded in the shoulder. The guy decided that he needed to keep going, otherwise it would be too late. The main character named Rain grabbed his sore shoulder and continued on his way. He thought tiredly that there were demons. Even ordinary monsters were causing him a lot of problems. At this rate, he would run out of mana and stamina before he reached Marina. The main character named Rain entered the spacious hall. He looked around in surprise and said that the path was clear. Here he would be able to rest. He was already too exhausted. The main character named Rain saw a throne made of crystals. Loput was sitting on it. She looked at the guy with disdain and said that he had finally come. She had been waiting for him for a very long time. The girl jumped off her throne. Because of her small height, she almost fell. Loput swayed awkwardly from side to side. This destroyed her image. She looked proudly at Rain and said that she was Loput. She was here to kill him. She said this very confidently. It was clear that she was confident in her victory over Rain. Loput clutched her growling stomach and walked up to Rain. She said pitifully that she was so tired of waiting for him that she decided to kill a few monsters in these dungeons. She continued to say that because of the fights, she was very hungry. The main character named Rain looked at her in surprise. She did not look like a demon who was going to kill him. The protagonist, Rain, watched as Loput groaned from hunger. He thought he had a feeling that this had happened before. This scene was similar to when Karen asks him or someone else for food. The main character named Rain took out 2 chicken legs from his backpack. He asked Loput what she thought about having a snack. The girl happily took the food and began to eat it quickly. Loput smiled widely and said that he was not a bad guy at all. She was really very hungry. The girl tried to put the whole piece in her mouth to eat it all at once. The main character named Rain was surprised to think that she really was exactly like Karen. He could not believe that there was a Karen likeness in the world. This shocked Rain very much. He did not need a second Karen. Loput continued to happily chew the meat that the protagonist named Rain gave her. She was really happy about it. The protagonist named Rain watched her for a while, but she was in no hurry to finish eating. The main character named Rain turned around and started to leave the room. He told her to eat there and not stop, and it was time for him to go forward. The guy hoped that he could pass without a fight. Loput suddenly ran up and grabbed Rain by the collar, but at the same time she did not stop eating. The main character named Rain stopped in surprise. He had already thought that he could pass. The girl asked Rain that he did not think that he could bribe her with a piece of meat. The guy turned around and began waving his hands in front of Loput's face so that she would calm down a little. The main character named Rain shouted loudly that it was not at all. It was not that, she just got it all wrong. He couldn't point a sword at a girl. Loput listened to him attentively. She had eaten the entire meat and was just holding the bone in her hands. Loput smiled stupidly and asked what she meant. How? She smiled widely and stared at Rain. Loput said that he was right. She was really very nice and nothing could be done about it, but he should know something. The girl made a very scary face to scare Rain. Loput looked at Rain angrily and said furiously that one could die if one underestimated her. She was really offended that the main character named Rain thought that she was very weak. The main character named Rain abruptly ran away from Loput. He did not expect that she could be so frightening. He thought angrily that the atmosphere in the room had become simply terrible. He would still have to fight. The main character named Rain looked at Loput, but she had disappeared. He stared in surprise in front of him. The girl had just told him that she would definitely kill him, and then she had disappeared. Loput had appeared behind Rain. She was about to kick him. The guy felt that something bad was happening. He immediately turned towards Loput. He thought in shock that she had incredible speed. Loput hit Rain's hand. He dropped his sword. The blow to the girl was very strong. The main character named Rain grabbed his arm, which began to hurt terribly. He thought that she had hit his arm right. There was no hint that she could miss. Loput was too fast. The girl smiled widely and screamed that she had only just begun her fight. She decided to hit Rain with her fist this time, to definitely disable him and win. The main character, Rain, managed to dodge the fist at the last moment, but Loput wasn't going to give up. She tried to punch Rain in the head again. He anticipated it and dodged it with ease. Loput decided to kick this time, but the protagonist named Rain stopped her. The protagonist named Rain tried to block all the blows, but some still hit their mark. Loput was constantly moving. She didn't stop for a second. The protagonist named Rain thought angrily, "This is how strong the demon is. She is too fast to resist." Loput put all her strength into the blow, but the main character named Rain did not expect the blow now, so he did not have time to group himself. The main character, Rain, was hit in the chest. It was too strong, and he was simply knocked off his feet. He flew several meters away. Loput was really strong, although you couldn't tell from her appearance. The main character named Rain was flying into the wall, but he crashed into something soft. While he was flying, he raised all the dust that was in the hall. At first, he did not understand what happened until he felt hands on him. He looked up in surprise and saw Lolina, who had saved him. She said that it was dangerous. The main character named Rain couldn't believe that she was actually here now. The main character named Rain jumped away from her and loudly asked what she was doing there. Lolina rose from the ground and replied that his comrades had asked her. The girl shook out her clothes and began to tell her story. Lolina said that when she was walking along the road, there were a lot of traps. They had to split up. In fact, Karen activated these traps, but Lolina did not see her because of the darkness. The main character named Rain grabbed his wounded hand. He told Lolina with a pain in his head that, in this case, they should find them. The girl ran up to him and did not let him get up. Lolina said that he needed to regain his strength. They would buy him time. The girl was very worried about Rain's condition after the battle with Loput. Lolina looked at Karen and the dog they had also taken into the dungeon. The girl shouted at her to hold her back. Karen smiled broadly and replied that she should be trusted in this matter. Karen approached Lopit. The girls looked like sisters. They were the same height and the same build. The main character named Rain was right when he compared them. The girls looked at each other for a few seconds. Lopit leaned towards Karen's face and cheerfully said that she would be fought by a slave and a dog who had no mana. She haughtily asked if they were serious now. Lopit looked at Karen more closely and smiled widely. She said that she was wearing these horrible clothes. Lopit asked Karen that she really had no taste. Karen gripped the handle of the hammer and said angrily that these clothes were given to her by the main character named Rain. She dare not say that. Karen struck with all her might with the hammer, but Lopit dodged. The girl did not expect that Karen would actually start fighting her. She managed to dodge the blow at the last moment, but the hammer caught her clothes and tore them. Lopit grabbed the torn piece of cloth and screamed that her clothes were a birthday present from her father. They were her treasures. Let her just try to tear them. Karen angrily screamed that if she was so dear to her, then she should get what she deserved. She walked up to the pile of crystals and hit them with all her might. Sharp shards flew towards Lopit. Lopit began to maneuver quickly. She angrily shouted at Karen. What is she doing now? She will get her dirty. The girl was very surprised by Karen's action. She did not expect that she would fight like that. Karen stood next to the dog and pointed at Lopit. She screamed loudly for Dontero to attack. It was time to rub against her. Dontero got into a fighting stance. Suddenly, he stopped and didn't want to go anywhere. Karen grabbed him by the collar and cried out pitifully that Dontero had promised her he would try his best today, and it was time. Dontero didn't want to listen to her and resisted with his paws so that no one would make him go anywhere. Lopit blushed with the desire to pet Dontero. She liked him very much. She told Karen that her dog was completely useless, but she really wanted to pet him. Lopit began to approach Dontero. She had already stood on him and stretched out her hands to him. Karen happily screamed that she was caught. The girl grabbed Lopit by the bottom of her dress. The girl looked at Karen in surprise and asked what she was doing now. Karen lifted Lopit's entire dress and covered her head. She tied the dress with a bow at the top so that the girl could not climb out. Karen began to tickle her to teach her a lesson. Karen laughed loudly and screamed that this is what can happen when Dontero distracts attention. Lopit started jumping on the spot and trying to get out. Lopit screamed loudly that this was very mean. She began to try to untie the knot on her hands that was holding her back from freedom. She would show what she could do. Lopit screamed loudly that such a knot would not hold her. Karen asked with a grin that she was sure of her words. She came closer to Lopit to mock her. Karen said maliciously that these were her favorite clothes. If she overdid it a little, they would tear, and these clothes were a gift from her beloved dad for her birthday. Karen took a stick and started poking Lopit. She laughed loudly at this. Lopit angrily screamed at her to stop doing this. The dog at this time walked in circles around the girls. Lolina and the main character named Rain watched Karen and Lopit. The girl said that she was no match for her arena tricks. The main character named Rain said in shock that this was just mockery. Lopit said tiredly that she would tell them the secrets of the dungeon. They just had to untie her. Karen tilted her head to the side and asked what secrets she would try. Lopit said that there were traps installed here that prevented the monsters from escaping to the surface. The girl fell silent and stepped on one of the tiles. Lopit angrily screamed that, of course, she was here too. A tile disappeared under Rhine and he flew down. The same thing happened to Lolina, and then with Karen and Dontero. Lopit jumped up and down happily and shouted that that was what they needed. Lopit never loses. She stepped aside a little and stepped on a tile, which dropped. A hole appeared under Lopit into which she flew. She said that she did not expect this now. At this time, the main character named Rain was flying down. He did not understand that he was at the end of the hole into which Lopit had thrown him. He thought in horror that there was a trap here too. He needed to think of something quickly. The main character named Rain grabbed the sword and thought that it would be useless, but he could not do anything about it. The guy stuck the sword into the wall and stood on it to stop his fall. The main character, Rain, hoped that everything would be okay. He grabbed the walls to stay upright. He came down with a huge impact but remained unharmed thanks to the fact that he stopped his fall. He was lying tiredly on the ground in a pile of sand and bricks. The main character named Rain exhaled tiredly and tried to get up. He said that he was very lucky. At least he managed not to crash. Suddenly he raised his head and saw Mia. They looked at each other in surprise. The main character named Rain did not expect to see her here. He did not even know what to say to her now. It was really unexpected. The main character named Rain got up from the floor and said that he was sorry for disturbing her. He fell here by accident. Miyu didn't say anything yet. The main character named Rain added that it wasn't like he didn't see anything, but he would keep it a secret that she was a girl. Miyu smiled sweetly and said that it meant nothing. She screamed loudly that he would get it for this now. Miyu hit Rain with her magic. The guy screamed loudly. He did not expect this when he fell down. The main character named Rain grabbed his battered face and said that he apologized for it, but there was no need to be angry. The guy asked Miyu what she was doing there. Anyway, her father had brought her back home. Miyu angrily asked what he had just asked her. The girl furiously said that some girl who always walked with her dog had activated the traps, and she had fallen into them. Miyu asked that she was very interested in who had done it. The main character named Rain awkwardly said that he apologized for her. He had not expected Karen to do this. The main character named Rain asked Miyu with interest why she was waiting here for help. The girl quickly answered that he was wrong. She tried to find a way out of here, but so far she has not succeeded. The main character named Rain looked around the corridors in surprise and asked where they are now. Miyu replied that it was a concentration chamber. Dozens of elongated cages hung around them. The protagonist, named Rain, asked in fear why they were even needed here. Was this all for monsters? Miyu looked at him carefully, waiting for what else he might ask. There were no more questions, and she answered that, looking at the numerous tools, it seemed for people. Miyu approached the human body, which turned into a crystal. She said that she seemed to know this girl who died so cruelly. She met her when she was very young. They even played together. Miyu said that the girl who bloomed a flower with magic when she cried. She heard that the girl left school due to illness, but who would have thought that she ended up in this place? The main character named Rain angrily asked why such a kind child was captured and sent to this dungeon. He thought for a while and said, that was this really the only way out? Miyu sadly said that she didn't know what was going on. She walked up to the body and took the shackles off her hands. Miyu looked at the girl sadly for a few seconds. She told Rain that this was why they had to study hard at the academy. They couldn't let something like this happen to the other kids. Miyu looked at Rain and asked him that he wanted to save Marina. The girl added that she wouldn't be surprised if Marina rejected him, seeing him so downtrodden. The main character, Rain, wanted to object at first, but then he exhaled and replied that she was absolutely right. Miyu stood up from the ground and walked away from the body of the girl who had once made her laugh. Miyu told Rain that if that were to happen, she wouldn't mind becoming his. The main character, Rain, interrupted Mia and screamed that she was being attacked from behind. He ran to her to help. Miyu looked back in surprise and saw the wall crumbling into small pieces. It seemed they were under attack again, and this time they would have to fight the enemy. Tirth stood on the broken wall and spoke that the invaders must be destroyed. She looked carefully at the pieces of wall that covered Rain and Mia. She looked forward in surprise and said that they were still alive. Miyu was in Rain's arms. She blushed with embarrassment. It was the first time she had to find herself in such a situation. The main character, Rain, looked sternly at Tirth and asked why she was doing all this. He didn't pay attention to the embarrassed Mia. The guy was just glad that she wasn't hurt. Tirth mockingly said that Relegus's son is very stupid. Her main task is to destroy all the invaders. She will carry out the order, and nothing will stop her. Tirth looked at Rain and Mia and said that there was no point in saving her. The protagonist, named Rain, didn't understand what she meant. Why shouldn't he save Mia? The protagonist, named Rain, asked Tirth what she meant. The girl responded emotionlessly that this was a warning she would betray him anyway. The main character, named Rain, and Miyu looked at her in surprise. Neither of them expected such words. Miyu screamed angrily. Why should she betray Rain? She would never do that. The main character named Rain actually believed Miyu's words. He did not expect any meanness from her. Tirth replied that she was a slave of one of the noble families. They gathered child slaves regardless of race. There were rabbits, sheep, dogs, and many others. The girl continued to tell that if they tried really hard, then their mother would even hug them. It was the most amazing thing she felt. These hugs were very valuable. Tirth said that for children who had lost their parents, this was the highest reward. For their mother, they were ready to do anything. She was like a deity to them, who could not be let down. The girl added that because of this, she also did everything that was ordered. She did it painfully, she did it dirty, she did it terribly, she tried to please everyone. She tried constantly, she tried every day. Tirth said that when she became weak and unnecessary, she was simply thrown away. They called her useless trash, looked at her with cold eyes, as if she was trash and no one cared about her feelings. The girl said that a woman trampled the hand of a child who was begging for help. Some woman stepped on her hand with a sharp heel and did not let go until a wound formed on her hand. Tirth said that for the sake of position, these people are ready to use even children. They have the name Griffinbell, that's who they really are. The main character named Rain and Miyuu looked at her in surprise. They didn't expect such a story. Miyuu looked at Rain with worry and said that it was not true. She did not do it. The main character named Rain did not react at all. He was thinking about something of his own, how he should treat this story. Tirth looked at Mia and asked what she had done wrong just now. The girl did not wait for an answer and said that she had come here for her own benefit. Miyuu was interrupted by Tirth and loudly shouted that she was wrong, it wasn't true. The girl was sure that it was all a lie, it just couldn't be. Her family would never do something like that. Miyuu screamed furiously at Tirth that her father wanted to resolve the chaos as soon as possible. She was sure that her father had good intentions in sending her. Taitre asked Miyuu that they wanted to become the central figure in settling the riots. Miyuu angrily screamed that it was not so. That was not what they wanted. Miyuu clutched her clothes and clutched them tightly. She said angrily that she was really worried about Reina. Tirth said that she was lying again. She added sternly that Miyuu just wanted to gain his trust. Her father was the same. He gained Religus' trust and revered him as a hero who saved everyone. Tirth said that now that the situation had changed, her father kissed the demon's shoes in order to obtain the highest title, and sent Religus away from the capital, to the outskirts. Miyuu's father really kissed Jade's shoes for the sake of status. He thought that it would be the best decision for his family. He met him in the abandoned city and did everything that Jade asked. The main character named Rain said that it was now clear to him. Miyuu stared in horror. She did not believe that her father could really do this. She thought that he was a good person. The main character named Rain put his hand in front of Miyuu. He looked at Tirth and confidently said that Miyuu was not like that. It was clear from Rain's face that he really thought so. The main character named Rain told Tirth that Miyuu sacrificed a lot to play the role of a son so that her father could avoid shame. Everyone was constantly watching Miyuu, but she never gave any thought that she could be a girl. The main character named Rain continued to say that Miyuu continued to protect him day after day. She is the hero of her family. Miyuu looked at Rain in shock and thought, "No, don't." Rain shouted loudly that she had been fighting alone all her life. She shouldn't compare her father. Miyuu looked down at the floor and clenched her hands. She thought that she was not like the main character named Rain said. Miyuu shouted loudly that the main character named Rain stopped. She came up to him and hugged him tightly. She was very grateful for his words. He really was a good man. Miyuu buried her face in his neck and said with tears in her eyes that it meant that he saw her in that light. She was truly touched that the main character named Rain defended her in front of Loput. Miyuu said that she was asking for forgiveness, but he was wrong. Miyuu pressed herself even closer to Rain and said that she was not as kind as he thought. She had lived her entire life according to her father's orders. Miyuu said this with regret in her head. The girl said that she had met him and only then noticed it, and the reason for her stubbornness was only because she envied his title of hero. Miyuu squeezed Rain's shoulders. Miyuu said that she was very jealous of Marina because she openly spoke about her feelings for him. The girl was really worried that Marina loved Rain. She continued to say that although the situation in the dorm had made her a little angry, she was actually very happy that he had found out her secret that she had kept for years. Miyu said that she had finally managed to appear before him as a girl. She blushed and added that she loved him. The girl pulled away abruptly and looked into Rain's eyes. The guy relaxed in Miyu's arms and practically slept. Miyu started shaking his shoulders. She couldn't believe that all this time he hadn't listened to her, but had just been sleeping. Miyu stopped shaking and thought angrily that he was just sleeping now, and he fell asleep because of her hugs. The girl listened and thought that he was even snoring. What should she do with him now? Miyu calmed down and looked closely at Rain. She thought that it seemed like Marina had said that she couldn't be near him when he was sleeping. It would be very bad. Marina told Miyu that his behavior was getting out of control. The main character named Rain was indeed still sleeping, but suddenly he grabbed the girl and hugged her tightly. Miyu stared at him in surprise. Marina's words were true. The main character named Rain suddenly raised his head and stared at Tirth, who had been watching the conversation the whole time. She wasn't trying to start a fight or anything, she wanted to listen to Mia and Rain. The main character named Rain let Mia fall to the ground. The girl asked him in shock what happened to him. The guy didn't answer. He was still sleeping, and his body was moving on its own. Tirth thought that the atmosphere in the room had changed a lot. The main character named Rain suddenly ran and started jumping on the wall around the girl. She watched as he quickly approached her. She turned her head back and saw that the main character named Rain had stopped. Tirth thought that his movements were strange. They were completely different from those she had seen in the arena. The main character named Rain ran up to her and grabbed her. He started to pull her clothes. Tirth screamed in surprise for him to stop or he would take off her clothes. She also screamed that he might find out her secret. The main character named Rain continued to mock her. Tirth screamed loudly that he would now find out about everything. She can't let this happen, she had to hide everything. The main character named Rain touched her ear. Tirth screamed loudly that electricity was running through her body, but it didn't hurt at all. Several discharges ran through her body. Tirth screamed and a thunderous rift occurred. The protagonist, named Rain, laid her on the ground. The girl no longer fought. She had no strength to stand up and defeat Rain. The guy finally came to his senses. The main character, named Rain, looked around in surprise and asked what had just happened. He did not remember anything that he had done when he was in the power of sleep. The main character, named Rain, looked at Tirth and shouted loudly that she had lost consciousness and also why some of her clothes were torn. Miyu said that, "Good morning, sleepwalker." The protagonist, named Rain, approached Miyu and asked her hesitantly that he hoped she wouldn't hit him this time. The girl looked at Tirth and said no. She felt some inequality in the society. The protagonist, named Rain, found a blanket and covered Tirth, who was not going to come to her senses. He excitedly said that, whatever the case, they managed to knock out one demon. The guy told Miyu that he was very lucky that she was there. Miyu awkwardly said that she felt like she was just getting in his way and was of no use. Jade appeared behind Miyu. He said with a smile that, in that case, she should die right here, but no one would notice and cry. He took out his scythe and swung it at Miyu. The girl turned her head in surprise and asked what was going on. Suddenly, blood splashes appeared, ruining the dungeon. This blood did not belong to Miyu, but to Jade himself. He didn't have time to harm Mia. She was saved by Lin, who arrived in time. She couldn't let anything happen to the girl. She angrily told Jade that she would never let Mia be killed, especially by a demon. The girl stabbed her spear into the man's hand, who was not expecting it. Lin grabbed the frightened Mia with one hand, and with the other, continued to hold the spear in the demon's body. The girl looked back to see Milili, who was walking with her. Lin screamed that it was her time. Milili looked at Lin and touched the ground. She screamed loudly for the majestic earth to turn into a spear and defeat the enemies. Milili screamed loudly to make the earth needles appear. Stone spikes began to appear from the ground. They were very tall and sharp. Milili hoped that they could defeat the enemies. Lin worriedly placed her hands on Miyu's shoulder and asked if she was okay now. The girl lowered her eyes to the floor and said tiredly that yes, everything was fine with her. The main character, named Rain, ran up to Milili and loudly asked how she was feeling now. The guy told her that if she used such powerful magic, her mana might run out. Lily confidently said that there was nothing to worry about. May had healed her wounds, so she was completely healthy. The main character named Rain stared at her for a few seconds. The main character named Rain exhaled and told Lily that if that was the case, then okay. Lin and Miyu approached Lily. The guy looked at them and said that he was very grateful to them. They helped him out. Jade picked up Turth, who was still unconscious. He looked at Rain with a smile and said that thanks to the field shield, he had safely returned Turth. The main character, named Rain, looked at the demon angrily and thought, when did he have time? It turns out that he was aiming for this from the very beginning. The guy covered the girls with his hand and loudly told them to be careful. He is sure that Jade is up to something. The main character, named Rain, said that this is the first time he has heard of demons coming to each other's aid. Jade asked the guy that revenue is not natural. Does he know that there are not so many? Jade smiled and stroked Turth and said that as long as she was turned off, he could touch her as much as he wanted. The protagonist, Rain, asked in shock if that was his true motive. Jade told Rain that from their perspective, it was people who never came to each other's aid. The man asked that the main character named Rain went through the same thing. Is it true? Jade said that humans are extremely selfish. They are the greatest enemies of humanity, who have awakened a great disaster, but humans have chosen them as rulers. They chose temporary peace and hero worship. Jade continued to say that on that day, they declared themselves rulers again. They, the demons, would rebuild this world. The man asked what the fear-stricken people did. Jade didn't wait for an answer. He said it himself. People turn their anger on the real hero. They blame their anger on him to protect themselves. The weak grovel before the strong. Jade added that this is the nature of people. Instead of rebelling against the enemy, they prefer to attack their neighbor. The hero betrayed us. Who could have expected that just one phrase would have such an effect on people? Jade turned his head towards the guy who came in. It was Maggot. The demon smiled and told him that he had done a great job. Everyone looked at him in surprise. The main character named Rain angrily asked what he was doing here. Jade said that it was thanks to him that they managed to attract people's attention. Maggot looked down at the floor and didn't know what to say to the demon's words. Miyu asked the guy what he had done. Maggot shouted loudly that everything was not as Mr. Miyu thought. He simply overheard Mr. Jade's conversation before the ceremony. Maggot said that Jade was talking about how the great disaster, Katis, would be reborn to destroy the great heroes. He decided to protect Mr. Mia. Maggot continued to say that because of this, he followed Mr. Jade's plan during the event. He scattered leaflets about how the heroes are actually traitors. The protagonist named Rain angrily shouted that Jade was fooling people. He can't be trusted. Maggot told him to shut up, because the protagonist named Rain is a traitor. He is the one deceiving Mr. Mia. Maggot asked what he was planning. If he wasn't there, none of this would have happened. Jade approached the guy and put his hand on his neck. The man said with a smile that it was true, the hero's son was to blame for everything. Jade continued to say that he took away his beloved Mia from him. The guy repeated after the demon that the main character named Rain took away Mr. Mia from him. Jade released crystals into Maggot's body. Jade asked who should atone for the sin. It was Katis's time. Maggot became a huge monster. Jade smiled widely and said that he seemed to like his gift. The man added that he was no longer a man, but a chimera. Jade took Turth more comfortably and started to leave. Before leaving, he said that he was sorry, but it was time for them to go. Suddenly, he stopped and happily said that, for sure. Jade told Rain that he had a special gift for him, but the guy couldn't move. The main character named Rain screamed in surprise that it was a barrier. Jade smiled widely. The man said that it would be better for him not to touch him. The barrier has the ability to drain mana, and he should think twice before chasing after them. A monster appeared behind Miyu, Lin, and Milili. Jade told Rain that he could either give his little friends to be torn apart or kill Maggot to save them. The main character named Rain started trying to break the barrier. He shouted to his friends that he would help them now. Miyu confidently told him that he should save his strength to save Marina. The girl looked at the monster and told Rain that he should let her deal with the enemy. After all, Maggot was her friend. She came closer to him to look into the guy's empty eyes. Miyu angrily said that she was one of the great dukes. She couldn't let him get away with this, so as a friend, she would spare him the suffering that the demon had given him. The monster said that he was grateful to Mr. Miyu for this, and after hearing this, he felt a thirst for murder. Maggot hit Mia, but she dodged. He raised his fist and said in disappointment that she was not here. Lin jumped high and hit the monster with her spear. Maggot fell to the ground from the force of the girl. Lin turned towards Miyu and Milili. She shouted loudly that they had to act now. Milili and Miyu stood next to each other and raised their hands. Miyu shouted that she was summoning an all-cutting vacuum blade. Milili said that she would pierce the enemy, the strongest sand spear. A combination of magic occurred which is called a sandstorm. The monster was swirled by a hurricane of sand. Lin jumped back and stood next to the girls. Miyu shouted happily that they had done a perfect job. Milili said that no one could survive something like that. Miyu stared in shock at the monster that was still intact. Maggot asked with a grin what it was. He looked at the girls and asked angrily that this was all the scholarship student could do. Maggot came closer to them and said that it was his turn now. Mr. Miyu should watch him closely. The monster summoned a mud prison. Maggot said with a smile that it was a high-level magic that removed clothing and restricted movement. Maggot asked that he was much cooler than Shiro, right? The monster looked at Mia and asked what the master would do now. Maggot saw that Mia was actually a girl. Miyu told him not to look at her now. Maggot smiled broadly and said angrily that everything had become clear to him. That was the whole point. She should have told him about it right away. Maggot suddenly approached Milili and Lin. He said loudly that he was going to have fun now. The monster began to mock the girls to laugh. Maggot turned his head towards Rain. He said loudly that the main character named Rain should watch carefully. He was using slaves now. Lin screamed angrily for the monster to stop. She continued to scream furiously for him not to touch them with his filthy hands. Maggot got angry and told Lin that the slaves were not allowed to speak. They should not say anything. Maggot shouted at Lin not to dare to contradict the nobleman. He summoned a stone hand, which squeezed the girl even tighter. Lin felt pain from this. The monster said that Lin was a very ill-mannered slave. Maggot went to Miyu and laid his head on her shoulder. He said with a laugh that the education of a slave lies entirely with his master. Maggot asked Miyu that he was right, wasn't he? Now he remembers her words when his rad had screwed up. He remembers very well the scolding his father gave him after that. Maggot began to touch Mia. He told her that, in that case, she, Mrs. Miyu, should experience it for herself. Miyu looked at the monster in fear. Maggot asked the girl how she would scream. Katis also wants to listen. The monster began to mock the girl. He tried to cause as much inconvenience as possible. The main character named Rain listened to Miyu scream. Maggot laughed and asked what Katis heard. The monster looked at Rain and screamed that his friend was in trouble. Did he know? Maggot laughed and asked that he couldn't do anything about it. He couldn't do anything without his sword, could he? The main character, named Rain, touched the hilt of the sword and began to take it out. The main character, named Rain, told the monster that he had a sword. Because he is a magical swordsman, the guy used his sword to destroy the barrier that the demon made to stop him. Maggot angrily screamed that it meant nothing. He continued to touch Mia to anger Rain. The monster asked what he wanted to say, that he could do something bad to him. Maggot angrily screamed that he was just a good-for-nothing son of a hero. The monster really didn't see Rain as an opponent. The guy listened to him and decided it was time to save the girls. The main character named Rain ran at the monster. Maggot angrily asked him if he was even listening to him or not. He shouted that one wrong move by Rain and Miss Miyu would suffer at his hands. The main character named Rain angrily said that everything was fine. He would finish with one blow. Maggot didn't have time to do anything. He continued to hold on to Mia. The monster didn't think that the main character named Rain was so fast. The guy hit the monster's stone body with all his might. The crystals broke into small pieces. Maggot screamed loudly. He didn't expect that he could be defeated. The main character, Rain, looked at him and thought that he had awakened not him at all, but the seed of darkness sown in his heart by a demon. He killed the demon's soul itself. The protagonist, named Rain, let out a tired breath. The stone prison collapsed. Lin, Milili, and Miyu were free. The protagonist named Rain hurried to them. The guy asked excitedly that they were okay, no one was hurt. Lin turned her back to him and replied that they were fine, but their clothes were completely ruined by that monster. Malili blushed and said that she was very ashamed now. Lin looked at the guy who was now unconscious. She asked Rain if Maggot was really dead. The main character named Rain approached the guy and examined him for injuries. The main character named Rain told Lin that he was fine now. He just lost consciousness. Nothing terrible happened to him. Suddenly, the ground under their feet shook and began to shake. The main character named Rain screamed angrily. What else could have happened? Now they were overtaken by an earthquake or this, another trap from the demon. Malili sat down and put her hand on the ground. She excitedly said that these tremors are a consequence of using earth magic. The main character named Rain said tiredly, "What does that mean? How?" "They are constantly haunted by troubles. The ground disappeared under the heroes. They all started falling down, but there was nothing to grab onto." The main character named Rain angrily shouted that he thought so. The problems could not end with Magata. The main character named Rain looked at Mia, who was falling next to him. He loudly asked how deep the dungeon was. Mia answered irritably that she couldn't know. The main character named Rain saw a bright light that was coming from the bottom of the pit they were falling into. The guy asked in surprise what was happening now. They should be falling, but why was it so bright? The main character named Rain and the girls approached the source of the light. The guy screamed in surprise. What did this all mean? He could see the outlines of trees and a bright sun, which became the source of the light they saw. The dungeon was above the city. They fell into the forest that was around the castle and the houses. They fell out of endless corridors, but they never found Marina.